Okay. All right, good evening to everyone. I want to welcome everybody. We're going to call our meeting to order for this evening. We want to welcome everybody to our general meeting of May 24th, 2018. We have an agenda for this evening, so acceptance of agenda, rules of order, follow-up from the last meeting of April 26th. We have a presentation on cannabis, the recent recreational cannabis survey that was conducted by the Mohawk Council. We have some representatives joining us here from the FNQL Social Service Unit who will make the presentation. As well as a request for a presentation on Bill C3 on the Degenau case, which is membership, Indian Registry and membership case. There will be a presentation on that. We'll be presenting on the MCA budget. We have members of our MCA finance team here to make presentation. A presentation on the Renewable Energy strategy for the Mohawk Council. We have the Director, Dale Wago, here to make a presentation as well. Provide an update on the Akwesasne Police Commission, an update on corridor project, update on land claims, as well as an update on the natural gas expansion on the Gawanoga, and entertain business from the floor in a resolution accepting the minutes from the last general meeting. So with that, if I could ask for a mover to accept the agenda. Joel, second by Connie, all in favor? Thank you very much. So as it has been, as a protocol established at one of our first general meetings of this council in 2015, the general meeting cancellation protocol, which recognizes on the unfortunate, unforeseen circumstance where a member may pass away in the district in which the general meeting is taking place, we will relocate the general meeting. So this evening, unfortunately, we did have a passing on Gawanoga, Cornwall Island. The general meeting was scheduled to take place on Cornwall Island, but when we found out a member passed, we rescheduled to here in Gawanoga. So, and also at the same time, we would like to pay tribute and recognize all the members that have passed away in the last month since the last general meeting. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in recognition of those that we have lost. Thank you. So on behalf of council and myself, I extend our deepest condolences to those who are affected by loss and grief over the last month. So this evening, we do have our rules of order, which I'd like to read out for the record. So our meeting will begin at 6 p.m. and conclude approximately around 8 p.m., depending on the agenda as well as the dialogue happening. Personal issues will not be dealt with in the public forum. So the meetings here are for discussion purposes of the presentation. We will not deal with personal issues in this public forum. If there are personal issues that want to be dealt with, we will ask that they happen one-on-one with either member of council or myself or administration. As well, we ask that you please raise your hands when asking a question, when wanting to ask a question or address council. We also ask that you please keep your questions relevant to the presentation at the time. There is a section at the end of the meeting that's business from the floor where we can talk about issues abroad or addressing council. As well, we ask that any questions that are asked of council that cannot be addressed will be dealt with, will be marked and reported back on the following month. As well, our general meetings are recorded. You will see that we have cameras in the room, so they are in the purview of council or it's being recorded. We ask that you please not, when addressing council, if there's a concern that needs to be addressed with respect to programs or services within the Mohawk Council, we ask that you not please identify any staff member of the Mohawk Council by using their first name, so it's a generality statements and things like that to protect the identification of staff. As well, the general meetings are designed for members only of the Akwesasne community. This evening we do have members who are not from our community, who are invited guests who will be joining us for the presentations, but following that, we will then have the rest of the general meeting exclusive for members only. Those are our meeting rules for this evening. So we will now go over the April 26th general meeting action items, which are in the packages. There are packages at the back of the room as well as on the seats here this evening that have all of the material that we will be going over this evening, as well as the follow-up items from the last general meeting. So the last general meeting of April 26th, there was a question raised with respect to Bomberry versus the Ontario Ministry decision. There was a question on decision on the impacts. Justice portfolio has been able to follow up on that, and of course that in this case had led to changes in on how Ontario delivers First Nations cigarette allocation. So that question was asked at the last general meeting. The second follow-up item was how do we plan on educating the community in regards to the quota system for the tobacco pilot project. So you recall at the last general meeting there was a presentation on the tobacco pilot project. So education on the quota system has been ongoing as part of the presentations. We got 3 focus group meetings, 6 general meeting presentations over the past year. If there are further clarifications, follow-up can be done with the portfolio or the director of Dale de Nuago, who is leading the tobacco pilot project on behalf of the Mohawk Council. The other issue raised was sidewalks funding for sidewalks in reference to the information provided at the tri-district. So unfortunately, this is being researched as we speak, so it's being deferred to the next general meeting. Are they going to build up the roads to heavy standard to accommodate heavy equipment and trucks coming into Whoville? That's been assigned to DTS. That decision, that response to that is also being deferred to the next meeting. The research is underway. Note the need to include the future wastewater infrastructure. So that has been noted with the department and portfolio, and that was with respect to construction. A septic tank issue was brought up, so DTS and Housing is working on that. The updated funding is available for community members to address septic tank issues. There was a request for the chair of the membership board to present on the upcoming Bill S3. So there is a presentation this evening on the Bill S3 additional case. Look into grants and universities for renewable energy. So Dale de Nuago portfolio, Jim Ransom and Dale de Nuago will be presenting at the May General Meeting, which is this evening, which is the renewable energy strategy. As well as there was a request for virtual water request for additional bottled water for the month. So we noted 9 bottles only over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and the purchase of additional 6 more bottles. So that has been followed up upon. That is our follow-up items from the last general meeting for your information and follow-up. Also, just to step back we do have a few members of council who are not able to join us this evening. My apologies for not mentioning that earlier. The district chiefs, Louise, Troy, Vince, and Dennis are on bereavement for this evening. As I noted that one of the members of GoNoga had passed away, and they are at the wake this evening. Okay. So I will now turn to our first presentation of this evening. We do have a presentation on the recreational cannabis survey that we have been reporting on over the last few months. The Mohawk Council had formed a committee to explore, engage the community on cannabis as the government can move towards legalization. We do have 2 individuals here who will go through the survey results of Chief Adams Phillips. If there's anything else you want to add?
I'd like to present to you Emily Grantham and Joni Gray Russell. They're going to give you an overview on results of our cannabis survey.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today to present the results of the cannabis survey. First we want to thank you for the invitation to be here with you.
Just ask that you speak up a bit louder because we're in a really large room.
So my name is Emily Grantham. I'm a research agent at the First Nation of Quebec and Labrador Health and Social Services Commission, and I'm with Joanie Gray Russell. She's a support agent in research and evaluation. So just before presenting the results, I want to introduce you briefly the First Nation Health and Social Services Commission. So the Health Commission was established in 1994 by a resolution of the chiefs of the AFNQL, the Assembly of First Nation of Quebec and Labrador. The Health Commission is a non-profit organization, and its mission is to support the efforts of First Nation to plan and deliver their services. The Commission is an autonomous organization, not affiliated with any academic institution or governmental institution. So our mandate in the MCA Cannabis Survey was to create a survey with the subcommittee to supervise the data collection, to analyze the data, and to produce a report for the subcommittee. The subcommittee wanted to use the technical support of the Health Commission to answer a non-biased approach.
Thank you. So first of all, we were told by the subcommittee that there was an issue concerning the taking of the survey, because it was an online survey, if you remember. It was a quick survey of only 11 questions that were available online or by paper in certain locations in the communities. So we were told that a few persons that maybe took the survey more than once. So once we learned that information, we actually took a great care of that, great attention, yes, to this information. So once we did the cleaning of the data, because in any questionnaire or any study, you do have to do a cleansing of the data. So you just take all your raw data and just check if there's any abnormalities. And knowing that there was this case, we did more attention towards that information. So in total, there was 576 entries, and we only deleted 14 that we judged that were maybe biased or that were not meant to be there. So sometimes it could be like the person only answered the first 2 questions and that's it. So with that information, we could not have a good opinion of what was that person's intention. So that's why we only deleted 14 entries out of 576. So that's a good number considering the kind of questionnaire, considering it was online, so available to everyone in the community. So that we just wanted to say that up front. And we have a few slides on how we did it in detail. So if you have any questions after that, we can show you more in detail how we did every step of the cleaning. So, flip my page. So, you can go to the next, yeah, exactly. So like I was saying, it's 576 participants, which is really great for the community, because we know there's a lot of people in Akwesasne. So knowing that information, we were really happy to see that people did participate and are interested in that question. So the survey took place from February to April, so it's a 2-month period. And in total, there was 146 paper and 430 electronic version. So the electronic version was more popular than the paper, but still we saw that there was a need for the paper version because it's more friendly than the online survey when you're not used to using technologies. So when it comes also for the confidentiality, so I don't know if you remember, but in the survey there were only 3 questions to identify who took the survey. So it was the age category, the gender, and the district in which you live. And that was the only information that we had, so we could not identify people or persons. And also the IP address, of course, which is another information that we don't think about, but when you do an online survey, you do have the IP address. But an IP address is not individual, so let's say the same household or even neighbors or the same building would share the same IP address. So that way it was not able to identify specific locations. So it's mostly like areas of locations, we could say. But we did nothing with that information, of course, but it was still in the raw data. So after that, and also the property of all the data and all the report, all the PowerPoint it will be transferred to the MCA. So we were only there to assist the MCA to have those reports and PowerPoint, but we do not have the property of the results. So it's all to you. So we are only here to share what we found out, but after that, if you want to still go back and do other analysis, it's up to you, so that's good to know. So we can go for the first question. Like I was saying, the first 3 questions were just to identify a bit, like who is the participant. So at question 4, are you aware that Canada is legalizing the recreational use of cannabis in July 2018? So like we know, sometime this year, we don't know when exactly, we don't have a date, but Justin Trudeau decided that he will legalize recreational cannabis in Canada. So that we can see that the results are pretty clear. So 90%, so 9% out of 10 is aware that this is going on in Canada and that it's part of our news. So as you can see here, so we have the total number of percentages. So we have the 89%, and that's under is the number of actual participants that said that answer. So you have two kinds of information. You have the number of participants and the percentages. So it's up to you how you want to use the data. Or you can say in your own words that 9 out of 10 people said yes. So that's another way of saying the same result. So like we can see 9% out of 10 did say yes, that they are aware. And a few persons said no, or either I don't know or I don't want to answer. So that's usually that's the usual kind of answer for those questions. So after that, we can go to question 5. Want to go next? So, in your opinion, should the MCA allow the recreational use of cannabis in Akwesasne? Again, we can see that the results are pretty clear. So, 7 out of 10 said yes. So, 74% said yes, while 2% out of 10 said no. And a few percent said either I don't know or I prefer not to answer. So, we can see that the results are pretty clear. The difference is pretty clear. So, after that, I can pass to Emily for question.
Okay, so for question number 6, okay. From this question, we see that the number of respondents is not the same. The reason is that some people have not completed the back of the paper questionnaire. They did not flip the questionnaire. So from here, the results represent the opinion of 548 people. Okay. So the next question asked was about the sale of recreational cannabis in Akwesasne. So as you can see, the majority of respondents are in favor of the sale of recreational cannabis in Akwesasne. In the other hand, 2 respondents out of 10 do not want the sale of recreational cannabis in Akwesasne, and 1 out of 10 is unsure about this question. Okay. So here is the result for the question, if recreational cannabis is sold in Akwesasne, should that be true? This question had 6 choices of answers, and the participant could just select one. The most popular answer was a privately owned but MCA licensed business, which was chosen by the third of respondents, followed by a mix of the 2 chosen by the quarter of the respondents. So this choice of answer referring to a mix of an MCA-owned entity and a privately owned but MCA licensed business. If we group together the first 3 choices of answers, 7 respondents out of 10 choose one of those. Also, we see that 15% of respondents indicated that they do not wish for recreational cannabis to be allowed in Akwesasne. It is a little small number that what was obtained at the previous question. So we can understand that some people, even if they do not agree with cannabis, still wanted to express their opinion on how it should be sold.
So after that, we have the main findings. Oh no, sorry.
Okay.
One more person.
In the survey, there are 4 questions with similar wording concerning the production, the distribution, the sale, and the possession of cannabis. So for these questions, the possible choice of answer was yes, no, or I prefer not to answer. And we choose to present just the result for the yes and the no to simplify the presentation. So as you can see, the respondents have very similar answers to all of those 4 questions. So it is safe to say that the majority of the respondents, about the 3/4, do want Akwesasne to adopt its own laws and regulations governing all the steps around recreational cannabis.
So after that, we can say just the main findings. So we found out that people are aware about the upcoming legalization of recreational cannabis in 2018, so this year. 3/4 of respondents agree that the MCA should allow the recreational use of cannabis in Akwesasne. After that, the majority of respondents want the sale of recreational cannabis in Akwesasne, followed by 7 out of 10, so about 70%, want the MCA to be involved in the sale of recreational cannabis. And finally, 3/4 of respondents want Akwesasne to adopt its own laws and regulations for the production, the distribution, the sale, and the possession of recreational cannabis again. So, we can let you, I don't know if you want to use, yeah, you have copies. So after that, we did a breakdown by district. So we have the same results, the same questions, but presented by district, followed by gender and age category. Yeah. So it's up to you if you are more interested in a section than another. So we can have any question on those subjects. And even at the end, we have a few slides on the limits, the methodology, and the ethical also concerns. So it's all available in the PowerPoint presentation. So that's why it's...
And it's all available in the report, and the report will be available on the website of the MCA.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any questions for the two ladies on the survey results or members of the committee? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question on, it's getting close now, July is just around the corner. So you're saying that, first of all, there's no provincial regulations here, right, as far as cannabis? We're not going to follow because provincial, they don't have no jurisdiction. Federal, there's nothing in place with the federal government that's accepted here, right? So right now, what regulations are we going to follow in a couple of months when it comes in? Now, you're saying that everybody agrees to this, but is it going to be open regulations? Like Akwesasne has about 16 or 20 dispensaries right now. They're all open. And they're basing everything on sovereignty. So we don't have to follow OCA's authority or provincial or the federal government. So have you looked into that? What are you going to base it on with the survey? What regulations are going to be put in place in another month, 2 months?
Yeah. Well, of course, our help for this subject that is really going on, I mean, it's coming this year, it's really quick, but we do not have a recommendation in terms of political or territories issues. So the idea here is just to present what the population thinks about those subjects, and then it's up to the MCA to decide what they are going to choose according to your opinion also, I would believe. So that's why we don't have an answer to that, unfortunately.
Did you want to address that?
Yes, so for that, right now, the federal government and the provincial governments don't know what they're going to do right now. And that question is being raised throughout the First Nations, because last week we were at AFNQL in Quebec City, and they're not given those answers yet on what they're doing. And they don't know if the province or if it's going to be federal. So right now, most of the First Nations are gearing for, they'd rather deal with the federal part of it and remove the provincial part of it.
But wouldn't it be hard to have the survey and base the survey on, or is it just to say, okay, the community agrees
Yes.
that we should go ahead and...
Just to get an answer from what the community wants. That's the first and foremost thing we want. And to have those focus meetings also.
I have a question. And this refers to the same topic, but it also refers to the McDonald report. Have we fully looked at the McDonald report under this issue? Because in there, there's stipulations stating that somehow any community that benefits from this change is coming. Somehow we have to benefit. They're more or less saying, look at our language when we say it's pastoral. What does that really mean? The people to heck. So in that recommendation that they were talking about, that I'm talking about, in the wording it says that we're supposed to benefit from this somehow. Somehow. So how are we going to benefit as a community, not just a license? Mm-hmm. What this refers to, what I see, and it refers back to the gunshot treaty, where we have our own right to make our own license within our territories. You know, over the years, it seems like some of the things have got lost somewhere. And this is one of the main reasons why here. I recommend all of you to do the job you're doing. And you should feel safe. I do not want to run for council. But I'm here just to voice other people's concerns. Because everybody in the community knows these meetings don't work. And I'm asking, how come we don't go to meetings? You know, the people are educated. We do a lot of reading. We know about the McDonald. Who on here knows about the McDonald report under this topic?
That's something we can research as of tomorrow.
I'm just trying to hope that somehow we start thinking outside the box. Because we have, right now, we have so much opportunity with what we have in our own coffers right now. You know, down the line, 10 years down the road, they can say, goodbye, American and Canadian money. You don't want your funding anymore. Well, we send these laws and no more funding. Because that's all they have is hooked in. And I don't want to get into the house they got written down. I just want to leave it like that, try to open our minds on this. Because it says, there's another part in the town report where it refers to self-determination. That's why no cops, no RCMP, no ODP, nobody raising half to get the First Nations first cannabis cup that was held last week in Tanzania. Because they, in that report, they say we're going to leave it up to the community side. And on this point, I got to also reiterate what the people are saying. They're more or less saying, is it really going to matter? Look at our alcohol laws. It's supposed to be a dry reserve. But on the Canadian part of the reserve, we have more bootleggers per capita. So did it solve anything? Maybe we should look at it in a different way now. Put some of our discrimination, our dogma, all these things that we're taught in school, open it with, look at it with an open mind. It's not for me, it's not for you. Our own policies is we got to prepare for 7 generations in the future. Are we? And this is what the community is asking. I'm only reiterating what the community is saying. Because, you know, we've got the attitude, you can talk and talk and talk as much as you want. Whatever we decide here, it ain't going to matter in the community. They're just going to do whatever they want. And we have that attitude. How are we going to change that?
One of the one of the purposes of the survey was to gauge what the community's thinking. Because as we potentially go towards legislative development, whether it be for all barring any selling, or if it goes into a regime where it's regulated through a licensing regime, we wanted to find out what the community were thinking first before we start putting time, energy, and resources into that development. But one of the things that we...
I don't mean to oppose or anything. I felt this should have been looked at 2 years ago.
Yep.
As soon as this is, we're going to go this direction.
Yeah, no.
It's already going on in the
Yeah,
already.
no, absolutely. We are a bit behind the ball on this. But the other thing that I continuously said to council is that we can't rule out what some of the opportunities are on this, right? And I would say, you know, what I've continuously said in community and the meetings and to the council is we have to be realistic in what our approach is. And absolutely, you've just described situations where we have something that says something, but the reality is a bit different. So we need to find the balance between community priorities, community development, as well as protection of community at the same time.
This is only 1% of the community aspect. I do have a lot more to say. As it comes, I will say it. This is only 1%. You know, when I'm seeing at the meetings, there's a lot of people going. It does not mean that they support it. It means that the young kids are looking for work here. They don't want to be like us iron workers and having to travel all our lives out of town. Ready to reserve, you find out how much your wife hates you. Bye. We don't want that anymore. They don't want that anymore. They want their parents to stay home to work. You know, they want work.
Are there any other questions on the presentation for the council on with respect to cannabis or the survey itself? Okay. Thank you very much for making the presentation.
Safe travel.
Okay, so we'll move along. Our next presentation is on Bill S3. Sorry.
So now that the presentation and what's your plans to, what do you do then?
April, do you want to answer that?
Well, we still have to do some more groups because I don't know if you heard her, the one groups that didn't do the survey were 18 and under and 65 and over. So we still have to capture those 2 groups. Sorry. So we still have to do some more surveying or some more focus on the younger group and the older group, 65 and older, to let them know about what's going on and what their take is on cannabis, this new cannabis regulation or law. And then we'll have to move on from there And we have to get together with the group and find out what the next steps are.
So the survey right now is not done. Is that what you're saying?
The survey was to pretty much to gauge on who knew about cannabis, what their thoughts were and what they wanted to do. And then from there, we knew that there was going to be some people that were going to be lacking in participating. And we discussed that we're going to go ahead and get to those groups also.
So we have actually had a conversation with the youth, our youth council or youth of Akwesasne on a bit of this. And we do have one of our reps here today who met last week with a few youth that are part of youth council as well as just invited youth over. So she's prepared to speak a bit about this if you'd like.
Yeah, I can. So last Thursday, I'm Mia Francis, by the way. I'm one of the youth council members. So last week we had a youth council event for youth ages 17 to 29. More of just like laying out the education and knowledge piece with cannabis. So we had them take a pre-meeting survey with just the knowledge that they already had. And different questions like did they know the difference between like recreational and medicinal, and just kind of based it off the survey that MCA did. And then we had 7 youths come and do a presentation and talked about some of the different things such as like age limit and what it means for like the community. So we laid out all this information. We had about 9 youth participants show up. There's about 20 of us for the whole event. And then after we laid out everything, we did a post-survey to kind of see if the information we presented had any effect. And I would say it was pretty successful. We got some pretty good feedback from it. We just got the raw survey data, so hopefully within the next couple weeks we'll have some type of summary to present to council and have more grasp on what the youth actually thinks. So this was our first one, phase 1, and then we're going to do another one. And we did it at the Ganadago Rec, so now we're going to do one in Snai and on the island. So that way we'll be able to reach all 3 districts. But those haven't been planned yet. But we are out there talking to the youth about what they think and what they want.
What's your preliminary finding?
I'm sorry, what was
Your
that?
preliminary finding?
It was pretty more towards tilt in favor. As regards to age limit, we had options for 18, 19, 21, and 25, and kind of laid out that Ganawage already did a age limit of 21. So the first findings, they kind of gauged there was a variation between all 4, but after we kind of laid out everything, we kind of got geared more towards, leaning towards 18 years of age is what the youth is thinking they want, the age of like purchase today.
No need to interject or anything, but according to Ontario civic law, which somewhat reserved is governed under, even the Canadian the left side is, because we instilled the civic law, and it states 19 years of age, according to the civic law. And this is for the consumption of alcohol, and this is sort of one in the same direction. Because what some of the others did, like I said, I went to all the meetings, and their presentation, nobody is 19 and under is not even supposed to be there. So I'm also surprised that you mentioned that. You're breaking your license.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, so what Mia's describing is some of the work that the youth is doing, which will feed into the work that we have done already on the survey to help at least draft at least set out like a framework of how we should proceed with respect to legislation development. Yeah.
So right now, like when we look at that, what you're saying about the 19 years of age, that's Ontario. But we still don't know what's going to happen here with what they're going to do with the First Nations and with the federal government or the provincial government, because they don't know that yet. So right now, from what we gather from this data, is they want it regulated, but we don't know how to go forward yet because they're not telling us yet. That's the problem.
Hey, what I found out on that, what happened to the factory, and the way to do it on policy, do everything, and they found out was, all they had to do is the security part of it, and adopt your own policy, and they could have opened up 4 years ago. This conversation should be a month ago. It's like so quickly getting moved done.
Yeah, and the other thing too with talking about the age group is we had the discussion prior that even some of the provinces with the alcohol, they're thinking of looking at a 21 years of age to push that age limit. So that's going to be taken into consideration. And we know that the development of, we discussed this, the development of the brain also doesn't stop until 25 years of age.
Yeah, because people are laying out that 21 would be better than 18 because they're more responsible. But if we're talking about making it safe for like brain development, all the studies point that you would have to be 25 and up. That's kind of when your brain stops developing and they wouldn't have as harsh effects. So I think moving it, I'm still on the fence personally, but moving it up to 21 wouldn't move you out of that danger zone when it comes to like the effects of the brain.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I think of what we're working on with the cannabis, yeah, we are behind the 8 ball. We had created a working task group months ago, and we're just starting to get rolling on a lot of the work. I know how long it was. We as a council know when it was coming into effect. But one of the things we really need to consider is we have to look at the social impacts here. We have to look at the health impacts. We have to look at the educational components here. It's not just setting an age limit and saying that's what we'll follow. Excuse me?
Enforcement.
Yeah. So what we need to do is take all of that stuff into account when you're creating the law and the regulations you want to follow, because that law will be for here. It won't be for Ontario. It won't be for Quebec. It'll be for Akwesasne. And you decide what that law looks like based on the information we're all pulling together here. But there's a lot more components to creating this law and making it effective for this community. Because, can I finish? Because this, as was mentioned by yourself, there's generations to follow here. And we have to be prepared for those social impacts that we're already under right now. So we can't just look the other way when we're talking about an age limit. So yes, enforcement is one of them, and I've been working on enforcement for quite some time, but that has to be able to be here if we're going to create a law, because we have to enforce them, just like you mentioned the other one that's not enforced. You know, but when a community creates the law, the community has to be prepared to do their part to help enforce it. When people are calling to say something's going on, you have to put it in writing, you have to go to court, you have to be part of that. When you don't finish it, then when it gets to court, it doesn't get finished, the person walks away, and we're being criticized for it not being handled. So there's a lot of work to look at when we're creating this. And that goes for all of us. It's not just council, it's not just youth, it's the community as well.
I just have a suggestion here. Has anybody looked at the Oklahoma report, the study that they did on us as a distinct nation? We are distinct. We do have extra strands in our DNA, and yes, marijuana is linked with it somehow. Has anybody looked at this report? Oklahoma University did this report. 2013 was they published this report. You know, again, we're behind the 8 ball. And that's why the elders told me to get off my ass and go to meeting.
All right, I'm going to ask April to wrap this up, and then we're going to move along.
Yeah, going back to Connie's discussion, and we did have a discussion on the health and the traditional part of this too, because traditional medicines do have a great concern on the use of cannabis, medical and recreational.
All the I don't mean to be rude here, but all the sociology reading has been doing to us for the last 218 years. And is it them doing the talking, or is our own people doing the talking?
Well, they got great concerns, and their concerns are consistent of, we don't know if our practices are going to be effective if they're using. We have to be that needs to be known on what they're on. So all those things are being compiled, and it's a great concern because even the nation themselves said we're not going to condone it, any of it. So
aspect of all this dogma is coming to mind is based on a German experiment that they done in 1800 on the nation of South America, where all these dogmas that Trudeau built his white paper off. And it's already false. Everybody knows how these reports that get law are, it's done by the pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical wants to get their hands
very significant. April, did they ever put the nation in a position, even on the survey, to say that, you know, you want the nation to be part of their input in this task force that you're looking at? In the future, if you're going to set down regulations, requirements to follow, aids them, I think because you use a big part of the issues in your hearings on it, they still use it strongly the medicine. You know, there's 10 weeks of teaching in medicine. There's so many things that they use traditionally, and traditional medicines, everything else. So I think part of your question should ask, would you, you know, I think that the nation felt representatives of the nation should be part of building this whole outline of legislation. That's just my personal opinion.
Maybe that's the next steps we can take with them.
Myself, on that note, I'd rather see us develop a nation than another somebody from the community go to Ontario or the federal government to get a license. We're going against our own rights now. I was taught as a kid to never stop fighting for it. And that's our land. We don't want to get into that part yet. Another point. I'll wait till my turn.
Okay, anything else on that, April?
I'm
No?
good, we'll wrap.
All right, thank you very much. We are going to move along. We do have another presentation this evening. It's on the Bill S3 Dejeneaux case, so I'll ask, we do have the manager from the Office of Vital Statistics here. There is documentation in your packages as well. So we'll go over briefly about what the Dejeneaux case is and what the impacts are.
I'm right here.
Yes. Yeah.
Having the OPS manager do this presentation. And I think there's quite a few chiefs that have been going to these meetings. My recommendation would be that they do the presentation to the community and to the membership board, because we have not received any information, documentation on it. So I don't know if that puts her in what kind of situation, but I know that the chiefs that have been going to these meetings that have been.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
All right, so we had already had arranged for Jackie to present, but I thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Esther. Can you hear me back there? The information has been slow in coming to us from Canada, and they tend to do things kind of backwards, to me anyway. This is something that came out, Bill S3, and was part of it came into effect in December. So they're saying it's a two-phase bill. Some things came into effect and some won't come into effect until consultation is done. But first they wanted a proposal on how we want to be consulted. So that's been done. And that's kind of odd to me too, that, you know, let's have a call out for a proposal on how you want us to consult with you. So that's how that was done. We still haven't gotten, I got some information yesterday, I think last week too. The little bit that we got before when they said this part has already been passed, we got after it was passed. So that's kind of how things are going with it. But I thought I'd start with this first slide about the Indian Act, because being Indian was based on if you were a male and you were a child of a male, or you married a male who was had Indian blood or was reputed to be from an Indian band. So that's how status was given. And then, so it's discrimination already. And it denies Indian status to women, and then it affects their children unless they married an Indian man. So it also affects their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. And 1985 Bill C-31 amended the Indian Act to remove the discrimination, restored status for those who lost it because of the previous provisions where if you married someone who was not Indian, then you lost your status. So this one restored that to you and possibly your kids, grandkids. And then it also also Bill C-31 abolished the influence of marriage upon status, acquiring it or losing it. So then in 2016, there was a two-stage approach to, in response to the additional case decision. And so the stage one tried to address all the inequalities that occurred, and based on if you were a male or a female. So stage two, they were launching a collaborative process with First Nations and to address some of these issues, clan membership and citizenship. And so Bill S3 complicates things further, and there are new categories to register under. So we have issues with cousins. You could have first cousins and one will have status and one doesn't, even though they have the same grandparents. So, and there's also a siblings issue where one sibling may have status, one may not, because one is a male, one is a female. These are some of the things that they're trying to correct. Only while they're correcting these things, there are other forms of discrimination that result from that. And unstated paternity, where father doesn't sign the birth certificate or the mother doesn't want to put his name on it or things like that. That person is treated as if that one parent is not status. So it affects the child's status. And the estimates for are that between 28,000 and 35,000 individuals will initially become eligible for status as a result of Bill S3, but that's across Canada. There are descendants. If you are now eligible to be registered under this S3, your descendants are also eligible, and children will gain status under 6.1 if their other parent also has status. But there's, if you think about it as a 6.1, which would be me, if I had married somebody who was not Native and we had a child, they would be a 6.2 because one parent is, one parent isn't Native. And then if that child married somebody who was not Native, their child becomes a 6.2. So one of the things that they're trying to do is take a 6.2 who marries a 6.2 and then their child becomes a 6.1. Yeah.
Well, wouldn't a 6.1, you have a maternal, you have a patriarch line.
Right.
And one's a 6.1, one's a 6.2. Well, why did they discriminate from the beginning? Why was maternal? Why was the woman told to leave the reservation if she married non-native? But then the native women had to leave, but the non-native, the white people came in. What was the purpose of that?
We know that's not our way of doing things.
I know, but why was it set up that way?
They wrote the Indian Act, not, it's not,
So the whole thing could
that's
be used
their,
as discrimination.
that's what's,
One part of that access to couple of four, and that's what we are all about, for a two-tier government, and that's a hereditary form of government. That's what the Indian Act was really. Everything happened right here at the border, right here. Talks about the Pooh. That's just Pooh, father's, grandfather's Pooh. The Mohawk, they got government buildings is right at the corner at because the Wolf Lodge was right here at one time. And this is long here. We're all Catholic people. And the government lodge was over at Pike Road, right at the corner right there. If nobody wants to take care of it. That was the government lodge at one time. It seems like we're losing our history. We already took care of this in 1986. That's why the membership code started. It seems like we're starting to duplicate now. Because we're forgetting what we already accomplished.
Now that bill has to be, does that have something to do with Miller, Monique Miller Owen? Does that have anything to do with that lawsuit?
no. No, they have their own issues there.
That's a different one altogether.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I'm saying, as a community, we never looked at this in the past.
Yeah, but there have been court cases, and that's what, when they have these court cases, and then there's a decision, and then, so they amend the Indian Act, so that that's why I wanted to show that first slide, because it was all based on the Indian man and his wife or his kids. That's who was registered, that's who had status. And if a woman married out, then she was out and lost her status. And even if, say, a woman had status and remarried after her first husband and married a non-native, she lost her status, and so did her children, even though they were born from the first marriage to a native. So things like those kind of things are being corrected with the court cases when there's a decision. But in the efforts to fix those things, other kinds of discrimination result from that. So this is supposed to be our consultation. Our consultation hasn't actually started yet, and they will be doing that. And there has been different meetings. This part of this came from the AFN, and that meeting was earlier this month, at the beginning of the month.
When you accepted that MRP, to get self-government, you didn't get enough names or numbers at first, so you did it again. I remember you got like 2,500 votes, or whatever, you got the MRP. You needed that to have self-government. My concern all the time is that matrimonial real property law. You have so many residents, you've got non-native that all live in here, hundreds of them, and they're living here under some kind of residency permit. So you have a code, in 87 you put a code to it. Now that code was not built on law. It's not a law, that code. That code was built on principles and the rules of conduct. That's what it's based on. So I'm just wondering, with the residency permit, if anything comes to a certificate of possession, let's say I'm married to a non-native and I got kids, and I want to leave my non-native wife on my certificate of possession. I want to leave her some land. Now, you're saying, no, I can't do that because of membership. But can that membership ever be challenged to 50? That's what they're doing in Untitled. They're using 15 in the Charter of Rights of Freedom, that you can't discriminate because of the color, race, creed, whatever you want. So I'm just wondering if that could ever be challenged at residency as far as Indian land goes. That's my concern, because if we ever start losing our land or being able to put them down on certificates as a joint tenant,
No, you
that's
can't.
a scary part.
No, you can't own land unless you're a member. And if you were in a relationship and there was a breakdown of the relationship, then the other person or you could petition to stay in the home, a marital home, and it would go through our court.
You couldn't
So
challenge
you
that
can't
and say,
transfer the land, you can't give it to them, they can't own it, they're not a member.
even to matrimonial real property.
They might be able to stay there while they're raising their kids. That's what the claim would be.
But
if
you
it's-
can never transfer it.
Can't ever transfer it, no.
Put on Indian land.
No.
Sorry to unfold, since you're talking about this, I just went through the Supreme Court, because I just did divorce for that, that's two as you would say. And what come out in the Supreme Court was hereditary land. It's still my family's land. Basically, it's that right now. Citizen. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Right from the Supreme Court already, according to this law you're talking about.
All right.
One on the case.
Okay.
Is that it for your presentation, or is there another slide?
Well, not really. It's just a handout that I had at the end. It's kind of a short overview of Bill S3 and that they're trying to amend the Indian Act. And it's a result of the additional case. And that's it. And we have Esther here, who's the chairperson of the membership board, and she was asked to be here to just to give a brief summary of the application process, or the process that you follow to become a member.
Nobody asked me. I did. Yeah, but that came from somebody else.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. Go ahead.
So as a result of the Deschanel case, how is that going to affect Akwesasne membership?
So ultimately, because we have our own membership code, and this isn't the first time that the Indian Act has been amended for Indian registry. So again, in our community, you can have a status card. Doesn't mean you have the right to live here. Doesn't mean that you receive benefits of being a member. It just means you're a registered Indian. So this isn't the first time the Act has been amended with respect to who can be registered. So in Akwesasne, in order to enjoy the benefits of being a member, you have to apply to be a member on the Akwesasne membership code. So it essentially means that potentially more people could be registered under the Indian Act of being a Mohawk of Akwesasne. It doesn't mean that they're a member. So potentially what it means is that more people will have to apply to become members of the Mohawks of Akwesasne. As it exists now, that's the same way it is. It just means there'll be more people applying.
The whole thing of the membership.
Exactly, yeah. There are a lot of communities in Canada that do not have their own membership code. So when the government says you're an Indian from, X band or A band, you get all the benefits that the rest of the communities, the rest of the people get. Right? In our community, it's quite different because in 1987 we enacted our own membership code.
Yeah. So I feel that this is null and void because we already have a membership.
Well, it just creates a bit of a situation where there's people registered that aren't members who may not be able to get benefits.
There's another act coming. I don't mean to be rude again. There's another act coming down the line. It's called Privacy Rights on Federal Land, which we are. We reserve federal land over to the Crown, which is considered federal land. There's another, it's going in the House right now about privacy. Once that privacy happens, any corporation will be able to come in. They'll be, even with you have the corporate license. They'll be able to take a corporate takeover for you for not smart enough to foresee things coming. Use our business now. You do have a business license. You gotta start thinking like a business. I'm sort of going into it, I was trying to hold on to the floor is open. And I think everybody's ears are open right now, so I'm going to go ahead.
I don't, we have another presentation first before we get into the business on the floor. Okay, thank you.
Everything I'm learning.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Into the other.
Okay. So we're going to move along. We do have a presentation from the MCA Finance Department on the MCA budget for this fiscal year we're in. The presentation is in your packages. I will ask the members of the staff to come forward to provide that presentation to the community. So this is Denise Collins and Richard Fournier. Denise is the comptroller for the Mohawk Council, and Richard Fournier is the assistant comptroller for the Mohawk Council. If you could stand right over here would be great.
Richard's going to play with the mouse. Hi, everybody. It's very nice to be here. I think it's been 5 or 6 years since we did any kind of a budget overview. This is truly a budget overview. It's not meant, at least at this presentation, to dive very deep. For those of you who are interested and do read the annual report, in the annual report, when it's filed, you will see that the budget figures for the year and the actual operating results by program and department are both recorded and reported. I recognize that that's historical. We don't know what the results for 18-19 are, so this is our best guess based on funding and expectations. And following along with council, the basis for actually building the budget, it's not just about government funding, it's about council's direction, their mission, their vision, what they would like the organization to be able to deliver to the community, meeting those standards that they have set. So in here we have, I can read them or not, put in the mission and vision statement of council, and those are the underlying values that all the directors work on when they're setting their budgets. Once upon a time in the 80s, if they gave you $1, you spent it the way they told you to, but it's beyond that now. There's a fair bit of ability to do what's right for the community, bearing in mind the funding source. So the 4 strategic priorities of council are self-determination, modernization, sustainability, and well-being. And I'm sure everybody has heard those words in various meetings with council, but they are the framework for the budget. So we'll start with the original operating budget, the actual overview. You will see all of the departments listed, their operating budget and costs, the anticipated funding that they expect to get, and what our estimated accumulated surplus or deficit at the end of 18-19 is. Now, we've had some turmoil over the years with big deficits and then recovering. In the current year, we're looking at the end of 18-19 of looking at a $600,000 deficit, $590,000. That would be the accumulated deficit at the same time, because we've managed to eliminate most of the deficits we had incurred in the past. Most of that was because of underfunding in certain areas. In a lot of instances, council has managed, various councils have brought in more funding to eliminate some of those headaches. We'll talk about the OLG budget, but you will see that this year we're applying $575,000 of OLG funding. This is the last year, unless the next council chooses to do things differently, that funding will be applied directly to the bottom line. While a lot of community members don't like that concept, and I recognize that, there are a lot of unfunded programs that council, as you go through this, you will see that those programs have been put in place by this council and previous councils to meet community needs. So those dollars basically help to look after roads, they look after underfunded programs that we actually need to operate. And we're going to dive into each one of these areas slide by slide. Is that okay as a starter? So that's where we are right now. The one trigger that's going to help us recover a little bit, we'll talk about that when we get to health. We did have a big deficit in non-insured, and Health Canada has agreed to fund it. So sometimes we get a little deficit roller coaster when excess costs that should be funded are incurred, because we're not going to tell community members we're not doing your dental, you're not going to see the doctor, your prescriptions aren't going to be paid for because Health Canada is not at the table. We will fund it and then fight with Health Canada for the money. Those of you who have been in various programs and have been employees of Mohawk Council understand that that's a bit of a cycle. It's really not always easy to be a chief, and it's not always easy to be a director delivering service. The next page, because I'm sure everybody's interested in it, is the actual current OLG budget. It's set as part of the annual operating budget. And council determines in broadly how they're going to actually apply some of this money to the community and to some of the programs. The community heating fuel subsidy is partially funded by council, and at this point in time, the trust also funds a portion of that. Things that are unfunded, like the Seaway claim that's ongoing, insurance, some of the youth groups, some staffing that was specific, community call-out, Mohawk language programs, summer student programs, assistance with the communication unit, executive services donations and funeral donations to communities are in here because there's no source of funding for this type of thing that does meet community needs. Housing subsidy is in there because council recognizes that a lot of people really could not pay market rents. So rent is subsidized in a lot of the units. The CMHC suggested market rents, we are way below that. This just helps to keep housing breaking even. And there's a lot of contributions to important community groups, the Winter Carnival, the museum, the 3 recreation centers all get some assistance out of OLG, Sny Homemakers, Tri-District Elders, the powwow. And then we have some one-time things. These will vary from year to year, but when we get to education, we're going to see that it's logical that 2 school buses are going to be bought out of OLG. Again, that's an area where INAC, when we get there, does not fund enough to actually replace buses on queue. There's additional fuel subsidy that was budgeted for the winter fuel program. Admin 2 has to be demolished. This is the budget to demolish it. Council is working diligently so that Indian Affairs, we hope, will assist with that, but at this point it's not confirmed, so we're not doing it. We're going to do the demolition when they're ready, but we're not going to assume we're going to get it. That building has to be demolished. We've got some opportunity funds for council. So that if something comes along from the community perspective that they need matching funds, a lot of times you do need matching funds for certain projects, we have a bit put aside. The bottom line is we're applying 575,000 operations, and at this point in time we've left 1.6 million uncommitted. That is not illogical, because when you see water plants and water lines being built, every one of those projects requires an own source funding application. This is our only own source revenue right now. So when we built the water lines in Snai, we built them in St. Regis, water plants, sewage plants, roads, that's never all fully funded anymore. It was poorly funded in the past. It's better funded now, but these things are not fully funded.
What's that self-sufficient funding?
Pardon me?
It's your only self-sufficient funding?
It's our only source funding.
Which
It's
one is that?
The line item of
the line item at the bottom. It's an only, OLG funding is funding that's not got any strings attached to it at all. It's our own source money, even if it's coming from Ontario through OLG. It's not the same type of grant or contribution as money for a school.
At one time, in Ontario, I remember in the early 80s, we actually used it to cover our operation expenses.
Not this one. This started in 99, 2000.
It used to be Ontario at one time. We used to access funding through that.
Okay.
When it worked for recreation as a kid, I think every recreation access that they
There hasn't been recreation funding funded at all by government since I showed up around 86, 87, and there's never been a recreation grant from Ontario.
That's what I'm saying. We accessed it before you got here, and you get.
And it's not my fault it went away, okay?
It's basically the same thing, it's just a different name.
Yeah, it's coming from Ontario, and council is making sure that they can't fund everything. I know there's tons of fundraising that's required, but at least they've got some core money, and council looks after the actual facilities.
You feel good about that point, because we're actually taking advantage of it there already.
Yeah. So that's a good thing, and council, I think, has made some solid choices there. So we're looking at, I think.
Pause there for 1 second. Are there any questions on that slide?
Any questions on OLG? Sure.
Yes.
There's something on that include the money. Is that done, or is it going to be done? Or?
It's budgeted to be done.
Budgeted.
But we're, if we're going to do it, the money will be available, but the plan is to try to get the Indian Affairs to pay for it to be taken down. But regardless.
So is that on common land, or what's the issue?
Well, there's no issue. The issue is it costs $200,000 to take it down, right? So it's $200,000 that we, could put somewhere else, arguably, but it's becoming a liability at the same time because it's just a sitting asset. So, I mean, the council will have to determine if they're prepared to invest $200,000 to demolish it and have it hauled away. It's on community land. Yeah.
I got a question on that building, since you're talking about the building on the road here. What was the actual report on the so-called contaminants in the building? I heard through workers that it wasn't as bad as they thought. It's just that
Well, I think that
no studies done on
there was readings done for asbestos, and they were at levels that probably should not have people in there. And the other thing is that there's a lot of fire code violations that were with respect to that building, so it's not something that we want to continue to occupy.
I see another alternative. Wouldn't it be cheaper to do the asbestos removal and modify it so we can get more apartments in there?
I'm not sure, like, to have asbestos hauled away, we're talking a few $100,000, right? And to install elevators, to make sure it meets the commercial code, I mean, we were talking.
Not commercial, residential.
It's not, well, we don't build to those standards, so.
Well, we can if we start thinking outside the box.
The problem is liability, right? So if somebody gets hurt because we didn't build the code, people are thinking outside the box. People are really fast to sue us when something goes wrong. So
I'm gonna go into the insurance issue, because I used to buy some insurance for the events I did, and it does not cover the people, only covers the facility, all the insurance we have.
so those are the things that we've had to consider.
My point I made in 92, 84. It's still like that today. I still get insurance for the event. And it's nothing to do for us, it's for the facility.
Yeah. Any other questions on this? Go ahead.
As far as OLG goes, we made a request at the last general meeting to raise the resolution you have for the community call-out of $150,000. You'll notice it here, right?
It isn't here.
Okay, I've seen that 150,000. It was passed through a Mohawk Council resolution. So at the last general meeting, we requested, because there's so many projects on the outside that are trying to create jobs, economic development. So we were wondering, what would disrupt this OLT funding if you raise that up?
It could. Council's got an extra 250 in here. A lot of the times they're using this to match. Sometimes the community member who's doing the business needs to match. There's lots of times that we use this money to match Quebec economic development funds, funds from Ontario, maybe for a specific project, which may or may not be totally always MCA. The matching dollars may come from here. We end up having to match funding a fair bit.
So what happened to these is, in your guidelines on OLT funding, I think it's 14 and 15, one says, no, you cannot apply for salaries. You can't apply for construction or upgrade of anything to do with your personal property. So what does that leave you? It leaves you maybe a workshop or something small as far as funding. And some people, they need a boost in their salaries to build their feasibility study, their business plan, and other things for some project. So I'm just saying that 150,000 distributed amongst all the businesses, you know, that's not a lot of money. It's not.
It's not strictly geared for business either. There's a lot of recreation and other community groups that may come forward for this, sports groups as well.
But it's all through MCA. What I'm saying is there any way we can increase the community budget from the $150,000 without disrupting so much? I see where you got like the Seaway claim. I have a hard time with the Seaway claim because you have that on the table now, don't you? We look for $45 million.
Not settled. Unfortunately, it's probably cost $4 million to get there. And we've been using OLG to help fund it. The glory and wonderfulness of it is once it's settled, council should get the money back that they've spent to get it to OLG, at which point it would be available for community. Sometimes you have to invest to get money. We did that with the Easterbrook claim. We invested we got most of our legal back. Only modern era legal, not legal from the beginning of time, but we were reimbursed a bit of the legal, and that does help to make cash that rolls to get other land claims worked on. Seaway is not something that's funded. Some of the other land claims have had a little bit of federal funding at the end when they're getting settled. There hasn't been anything for Seaway.
It just makes it tough for an individual or individual as a group or an individual Indian, whoever wants to apply to OLG. I just find with all the people that are building and a lot of them are denying. They're not given no funding at all because it just doesn't fit in the category of the guidelines when you do fill up your application. So I'm just saying that 150,000 is not a lot. So I requested at the last general meeting, what would it really disrupt if you raise that community funding to $1 million? You have $4 million to keep $3 million distributing food. Like what would be the real problem instead of having so more people can access more of the money?
It'll be at the council table, but for business, I'm looking at Jim, who's here. We do have the Quebec AEDF Fund, which is a good organization to seed business as well.
But it's all based on Mohawk County. Majority of all the funding is all based on, a lot of it is Mohawk County.
AEDF, there is funding for business. Again, there's a fair bit of there's work to get any government funding for business, and Jim's going, it's not what his topic is today, but it would be a good topic for another session. Would be able to show business people how to get money. And I know they have some phenomenal workshops at ECDEV. I have a staff member who went to one yesterday or the day before, said that it was amazingly good. So if you know there are businesses or community members who are interested, I would, I'm not making a plug for Downtown Walker, but I think they should go to the workshops because I'm told they're phenomenal. It would help, and it also helps save money. But we should forge ahead because that's the wrong,
All right,
not
there was
today's
one more
topic.
question over here. Go ahead.
Hi, Robbie.
The funeral donation,
Yeah.
you said, is that not covered? Is that what it's saying in here, it's not covered? Because when somebody dies, you apply and you get $2,500 from the federal government. And
You get
well,
federal,
over here, you get $2,250.
get federal money if it's CPP when you die.
Or you get those cards in the mail all the time. Anybody living in Gowanoga, you get them in the mail all the time. You get $2,500 if you.
I think you have to buy
somebody
the
that passes
insurance.
away.
I think you have to buy the insurance. I get them at home too. Sign up here with Canada Protection Group or something like that, and then they would give you money when you
So the
die.
government just gives that money to you.
No, they don't. It's insurance. CPP does it, but there's also an insurance you can buy.
But Canada Pension will provide you $2,500 if you contributed to it for 7 years. You have to prove that. So that's where that would come from. And we don't contribute to Canada Pension.
So this funeral donation line item is whenever the unfortunate member passes, Mohawk Council provides a check of $500 to the family. That's strictly from this pot. There is a pot of money that's administered to the community support program, provided that they qualify, which is around $2,500 that they can get. So
Right.
this one is,
But the
this one is
person
regardless
only gets
of criteria. There's a $500 check given to the family. That's where that line is
Okay,
specifically.
there's two different line items
Yes.
that I'm talking.
Yeah. No, this is at $500.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other questions on this slide on the OLG? Yes, in the back.
Just a comment, just so I'm sure most of you know, one of the big reasons that I quit Council Island was because of the way Canada 150 monies were handled. And of course, in a bad spot as far as the council delaying the monies until 7 or 8 months. That type of thing, and then making our guys work in the winter time on the river. I mean, that's one, just so you people know that that's one of the big reasons, just one of the reasons that I quit here in Mohawk.
Okay. All right, thank you. We won't deal with personal issues in our public forum, but if you want to speak about it after, we can do that. So, but thank you. Any other questions with relation to this slide of this presentation?
So,
Okay, I'll ask that you spend a very brief moments on going through these, the next slides, because what the next slides are on the presentation is the departments and then basically the cost of operating those departments. And if there are questions, please raise your hand as we go through them.
So the next slide is basically just the organizational structure, which I think just lays out the number of departments. And what we've done is just highlighted differences year over year. So if you checked the annual report for 16, 17, 17, 18, one's not there yet, you would probably see where this fits in. So Mohawk government has Aboriginal rights and research. Costs there are being reduced annually because there's less funding required because the claims are getting close to settlement. So they'll just be moving forward with new work. Nation building is at a break even. And again, Mohawk government, their budget is reduced. They've really been watching legal costs because lawyers can eat up a lot of money. And again, when land claims and those issues are coming closer to resolution, those costs will reduce. So you will see that Mohawk government is not too well funded. Arrow and Nation building are well funded. Mohawk government is something that we cover through the Indian Affairs Corps to make sure the chiefs can do their work. and there's a lot of us covered under core. So while it's a deficit, in the end, when you look at page 1, you'll see that it's not generating a $900,000 deficit because the core funding is applied. The next slide is executive services. There are a number of programs in executive services, communications, there's no change. Finance, our big change is we implemented a new budgeting system. Any managers here will either love it or hate it, but I know they'll love it shortly because it's very awesome. And it will soon be the vehicle for financial reporting. Human resources is following along. That's part of Council's modernization strategy. They are implementing a new performance management system, which again is part of modernization and accountability. Information services is going to be doing some system upgrades, and they're looking at maybe perhaps changing the cell phone carrier. We do have issues with actually managing to get the phones working in certain areas of the district. Operational support is taking over health and safety, and OVS always does a great job, but there's no real changes. And hi.
I have a question.
Yep.
Back to information services.
Yes.
Gossips, got it. Are we getting our fiber, our internet? Is that part in here?
Our buildings are fiber. We put that in. Actually, Mohawk Council did the fiber between buildings. That's going to be the project with the tribe, right? Is that? I'm looking at Jim.
Because you call Mohawk numbers now, they say go to MCA. So when we be like, ooh, okay, I didn't get this memo.
What was your statement? When you call where? Sorry?
Do you call Mohawk networks to get internet service on Puno Island, and they're referred it to Mohawk Council now. So I was just wondering, are we getting our internet?
Just real quickly, we do have an application into Canada to expand fiber to all the homes in our community. The application has been submitted. It's partially approved. We're waiting for some approval from Quebec. But the application is done in partnership with the tribe, with the Mohawk Network. So it is in the works. But specifically to this presentation, when you talk about the information services and the high speed, it's not in regards to that project I just described.
Well, thanks for answering.
It's only for MCA in here. So the next page is the overall executive services summary of the budget, high level, for all of the programs. It has a $1.8 million surplus. This is the extra INAC money, Indian Affairs money, that flows through to offset deficits in other areas. We don't tag it to a program, so they don't become dependent on it, which may seem odd, but it's just the way it works. The next slide is the Mohawk Board of Education. They have a number of programs. They now also have Yohahio with them. After-school programs are working well. It's up to the director to actually tell you, but I know there's higher enrollment in the schools. Food services, they're doing their best to provide wonderful hot lunch programs and meals for kids. Head Start's a bit of an issue that Council is trying to fight with Health Canada. Health Canada funds it. They haven't increased the funding in 6 or 7 or 8 years. Yohahio has rapidly expanded services with new money, which, and going along with what you're saying, they do adult education. So there's a lot of opportunity with the new funding to provide training, skills development for community. Ganadago School Council funded a Mohawk language program last year, so a lot of new teachers are becoming certified and in the language skills. Post-secondary is doing some work to broaden the scope, and to look at transportation, our buses are getting a little too old. So you will see buses in the education budget, but you will always see more buses, I'm positive, I hope, in the OLG budget over the next 2 or 3 years, so we can upgrade that fleet again. A few years ago, we bought 5 buses out of OLG. It's important that community children are safe on the road, so we do have to upgrade them. So this year there's 3, last year there were 2, and there'll be more in the future. And Sinai School, there was no significant change in the budget at all. The next page will show you, if you looked out year over year, I'm going really quickly, we're not going to drill through them all, but education has received a lot more funding. I know Yohahio has boosted it, but in general, having them here as opposed to with executive services, but Indian Affairs is starting to put a little more money into education, into special needs. and you will see that being reflected. The Board of Ed, I think, has worked really hard with INAC to manage to get more funding, and council has been very diligent. There are chiefs who are really on Indian Affairs' case to get the money they need to get education to the level it needs to be. The Akwesasne Mohawk Police Services is the next one. Again, there's a couple of new things here. There's not a ton of new changes, but there is a funding for a marine unit that's in the budget for the first time. We're in the process this year of negotiating funding, and Ontario agreed to pay for a retro to bring our officers up to par with OPP. So those costs are all captured in years prior to this year, but it's being paid in this year. That makes sense. That's how accounting works. Sometimes you have to pick up the costs in the year in which they belong and then wait for the money sometimes, and that's the case in this case.
They usually get reimbursed in their March.
Pardon me?
That gets reimbursed in the March fiscal budget.
We'll be seeing the cash now.
And to go from January to December 31st is actually March.
We're going April to March. And yes, you're right, the province, some of the provincial bureaucracies are on the December year end. So their operating budget now has 3 sections: police services, the joint investigation team, and the new marine unit. So it'd be nice to see them on the water. Community and social services has 5 primary program areas. Generally speaking, this breaks even pretty well. So there's not a lot of significant change there. You're going to see a new family well-being building being built in Snai. They have a home, they're retrofitting it, the engineering's done, and they're doing some design work. So the social programs, including family services, ACFS, and any social assistance, community support, they will be able to have drop-in services in Snai shortly. Don't ask me to define shortly. I know it's been designed and they're starting to work on it. I'm hoping sometime in the fall, if not before. One of the chiefs may know the timelines on that, but it is definitely in the works. We bought the house, and it is designed. So the next page is their overall budgets, but you will see that while they have almost $15 million in funding, this is a program area that is resourced well enough to break even. Most of it's a mixture of funding from Ontario and the federal government. There's a lot of Ontario funding in that particular area. The next department is health. Again, they have 7 or 8 programs. The ambulance service belongs here along with everything else. We're using a new billing service on the American side to try to bill for American runs so that will reduce their deficit and their dependence on council. Non-insured, I mentioned, we had a big deficit in 16-17. It's been funded. That's the way it works sometimes. Community health, home support are all on cue. Our 2 elders facilities are the 2 that run substantial deficits mostly because they're small and the level of care they're trying to provide. And they're not necessarily badly funded, but it's hard to run homes that are 50 beds as opposed to 150 and break even. Staffing's almost the same. To date, health has been able to cover those deficits. So when you look at their budget on the next page, you'll see that in spite of deficits in a few areas that are substantial because of underfunding for the old age homes, that it breaks even.
Denise, that community trust that comes out,
yes,
the 1.6 million. I went to the workshop and apparently they take the 800,000 that they need to operate. But they're honorariums, they have their overseers and everything else here. The 1.6 million that's left over for distribution amongst the community. I was looking at it, and I went to the workshop, and we'd like to apply with 29 projects outside the Mohawk Council that want to apply for money so they can do these projects. Now, every year, this is my 3rd year getting denied, and every year I look at it, and one of the first ones is MCA, what is it, septic system. It has housing. MCA housing is $315,000. And underneath that, you got MCA health, $300,000. And I brought that up at the meeting, that it seems like we're not applying for nothing, because everything in that whole trust is geared back to MCA. Because it says in there, in the guidelines, that we do not, this fund is not for private projects. It says it right in there. But I'm just saying, why is housing taking back $300,000? Why is the health taking $300,000? Is it because, are they running in deficit?
The health money was for equipment that wouldn't normally be funded. So they bought an ambulance that run vehicle last year, and they bought some specific equipment for Gianvenusa that the Ontario government was not going to fund. The trustees make those decisions based on what they feel is going to be the broadest for community needs. Last year, when the housing septic project was done, they got some funding out of the trust because that wasn't funded by INAC either, and there were a lot of septics that needed some very remedial work for health and safety. So
Well,
I assume that's...
I'm a little upset, and it's probably not even on your agenda, but I put in that $49,000 for it. The first priority you have in the trust is the well-being, the safety and well-being of the community, the health behind it. And the drug and alcohol treatment center that I'm building, it didn't qualify. They had the pantry, the church pantry, food pantry. They had Indian Time Children's Page. They had the Animal Society, 80,000. All these things fell in there, but there's no way at all that the drug and alcohol treatment center fell in the category. So, and I'm looking at it and I'm saying, why should I even apply? Because, you know, if you're not part of council and you apply for these monies, it takes money from your pocket when you have to do the application and do all the work, what they're asking, all the criteria behind it. But what's the use? If it's all geared back, it seems to me, I don't know where the trustees are coming from, but it seems to me it's all geared back to the council. So I asked the trustees, I said, why is it geared back to the council? They said, we're just pushing what was sent our way because council's the one that built the trust, them and their lawyers.
That's not, we built it, but we did not, it doesn't say anywhere in there that it has to go back to Mohawk Council.
That's right.
I think what happens though is that if the community identifies well-being projects, if the community identifies housing projects as a priority and health projects as a priority, what happens is that there's who in the community delivers housing programs, right?
Well,
So you can't, they're not going to give.
We never fall in that category.
No, but I'm explaining the scenario, right? So who delivers housing programs? They're not going to hire, they're not going to go to somebody and say, go replace 10 septic systems. The Mohawk Council already is in the business of does this already, service delivery. So with health as well is the same thing. That's potentially what's happening because there's not a lot of service delivery agents in the community besides the Mohawk Council.
Why don't you put that in the guidelines so that we don't apply?
But see, there's nothing in the trust agreement that says the Mohawk Council will become the recipient of the funding, right? And there's nothing in the trust agreement that gives us the ability to determine how they're going to spend that money. That's the way the trust has been designed, and the trustees do it, and it says that they consult with the community annually to determine the priorities. So it's not written that the Mohawk Council is the largest recipient. I think it's because there's nobody delivering services that kind of meet those priority areas.
Exactly. And if you look at the layout of the guidelines, if you look at exactly all the services and everything, there's nobody in this reserve would fall in the guidelines.
Well, in larger cities or in communities, they may have non-profit organizations that deliver certain services, such as, say, like off-reserve, like they call them friendship centers, that may deliver programming such as health programming, prevention program, things like that. The only organization that delivers bulk of programming in our community is the Mohawk Council. So when they did,
Absolutely.
So that's the point. That's the challenge, though. When community says health is a priority, housing is a priority, the only person delivering that is us, and that's how it has transpired. I'm not saying I agree with this, Dave, but this is how how the operation has happened. But the individual decisions are made by the trustees, not by council.
Yeah, I went to the meeting and they're like, they act like their hands are tied.
And I can tell you completely that we have no influence over them. We cannot say, give ABC company $1 million. That's not how that's designed. It's ultimately up to the trustees in consultation with the community priorities.
Now, there was a question that we asked, if you get $239,000, or $239 million from Dundee, so what are you going to do with the Dundee claim if you accept the money? Is that going to go into the same trust as the $50 million and collect the interest, or is that going to be distributed? And the trustee says, as far as they're concerned, no, that the Dundee would be a different trust or wherever they decide to put the money. But the chiefs on the island, when we asked the same question at district meeting, said it's up to the community if they want to put that money in with the $50 million.
So on our land claim update, we can talk about the proceeds. That's one of the things that we need to update on as well.
I didn't mean to bring it up.
Oh,
No, I
it's
just want to
fine.
make it clear that we do not determine where the money goes for the trust. The trustees do based on those priorities. So there's nothing written in the agreement that says the Mohawk Council will receive all the money. It makes no sense in having it.
On Dave right here, if you have, maybe the policies that we're governing ourselves under that such trust fund are not clear enough for us to understand. Maybe we should go take a look at it. Because he keeps on,
I
five years
know,
to the grapevine,
I
three,
know.
4 times,
And
now
it's-
he's been refused.
The trust is designed that it's the trustees that make those decisions. And they can determine certain criteria within there as long as it's not in contravention to the agreement itself. Okay.
Just got a couple to go. Housing. Some of the key things, you'll see that they've been expanding rentals over the last few years. We're getting more CMHC money to build some more fourplexes. I'm not sure whether it's low-income rentals or regular, but they are building some more fourplexes. They're expanding that. They're looking at a new housing inventory system just to try to manage, I think it's repairs and maintenance and everything else. There are systems where you can actually get that and tag it. It might make it easier. They're at the investigation point right now. And they're looking at the First Nation Market Housing Fund as a potential alternative. Hydro-Quebec, you'll know when you go to pay your bills if you are in Quebec that they're down to 1 employee. And when you look at their operating budget, you'll see that there are a lot of CMHC projects that have been constructed. These are all operating costs, they're not construction costs, and administration. So they do have quite a lot of houses and homes that are rent to own that they have to manage and look after.
Is there funding for that building down Snide, new building?
Which new
The one
building?
for administration building.
The one that we made the land solid?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
It is on the books, it's on the plan that council hopes to be able to build that. And they're tenacious enough that sooner or later, if you've laid the groundwork and it's ready, it will come, and I think that's the hope. But it's not on the instant horizon.
Right now, council doesn't have any building.
I know. That's not good either. So, would be nice. Justice, they've got a few areas. They're really they work very hard to toe the line on what they have. They're not super well resourced. They are a program that generates deficits. They've got the conservation and compliance, the court, and the justice program. It does a lot of development of laws and other things. I mean, it's not, I'm not trying to make a simplistic statement of what they do. It's just a budget. So. Technical services, they look after all of our facilities, our roads, water, wastewater plants, and they do a number of capital projects. And that includes flow-through money for the fire department in maintenance of facilities. And roads, for the first time, council has worked very hard. We are getting some money back from Quebec for roads, so that will help. It's not a big pile of money every year, but hopefully it is going to help with the bottom line. Capital projects, there's going to be a few projects going this year. They're fixing the health facility, a lot of renovations in there, so you're going to see that. Sewage plant upgrade is coming in Snide, and we've been funded to redo River Road in Snide. And Ganadago School, the insurance company is going to be very happy. The underground storage fuel tank is going to be taken out.
there's always a risk when they're underground with leaking, so it would probably be better if it's gone, and it's going to be gone. So the next page is their operating budget. They run with about $8 million in costs, and they generally have a deficit around $800,000, $900,000, just because things like roads, government doesn't provide funding for budgets. That's why those of you who are employees, we're always trying to get a bit of rent out of your budgets if we can get it, because these things are really not very funded. So that's an area that the core funding from INAC tries to wash through and cover, so that we can maintain the facilities reasonably well. It's a big job. And now we're down to the last one, and then it'll be Jim's turn. Dan Otawaga. The arena. We were lucky, and I'm going to mention this. There was Canada 150, love it or hate it, depending on who's here. They worked their butts off to get 3 projects. We've got new cooling system in there, a new ice machine. They managed to get upgrades that ended up in the building instead of outside because of partnership funding not being confirmed on time. But they have worked really hard with the arena. And you're going to see, if you haven't already seen, a substantially improved facility thanks to that work. ECDEV itself is doing its normal good work, and environment the same. They spend a lot of time in the summer out on Thompson Island, which makes sense because that's a phenomenal facility too, and their operating budget follows. They do have a deficit. The biggest driver of the deficit is the arena, again, because arenas don't make money. They don't break even, they don't make money. They're very important for the community, but you know, that's just something we have to eat and like, because you can't have an arena and have a surplus. And that's it.
All right, I have one question. It's not on your papers. It was in your audit, the audit the Canadian government did. And that's on the lease land within our territory, referring to the cottages on the island. In 1986, my family sort of held back. We always dealt with in affairs with Peel Island.
Okay.
And we took up our own affairs on the leases. In 1986, even affairs forced us to do our business with MCA now, back to the ban off. I do have a hard time saying MCA because we're not all Mohawk. We are a conglomerate of a bunch of Indians from the East Coast. But anyway, what is your projected on the revenues? Because I think that the agreement was something like 3% for you running money before it goes back to the people. So what is your projection on these monies? I don't see a full, of anything I read the last 6 months, I don't see something that discloses this information.
Are you talking about the amount of rent we get from the island revenue?
For
cottages. MCA Housing Department is now running leases that people at one time were getting for the cottages. And now it's all going through ban office. And affairs forced us to do it. Before we used to deal directly with the affairs in Peterborough. Then they moved up to Thunder Bay now, well, it's besides the point. But we used to deal directly with them because, again, it was trust. People didn't trust. But it's basic. I want to know how much is projected into the future now, because you are getting 3% every year on this money. I don't see it anywhere in here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Richard, do you understand the question?
We don't get a
I'm not sure I
percentage
do.
of
We don't get a
anything.
percentage.
In that agreement that was signed in 86, there was a 3%.
We don't get a percentage of that.
Hey, the manager that was presented earlier wants to just respond to that, so go ahead. So the Mohawk Council assists in administration of those costs of the leases between the owner of the island and the leaser or lessor. But if they pay $500, $500 goes directly to the landowner. The Mohawk Council assists in the administration. There may be an assignment fee that's done at the time of signing the lease, but that's it. So there's no percentage taken from the annual, the monthly, yearly fee.
The other part of Red Ball Housing just goes back to the audit. Yes, there's a discrepancy, everybody knows that. There's a little history behind that. At one time, that was a grant. every other reserve knows this. The reason why that was changed, because my grandfather on the Francis side said they want to develop some kind of economic, because we have no economic here. At that time, we had nothing here. They just said the river was all the fishermen went to work. We had nothing here. So he said, well, let's try to create revenue. We'll take that grant money, which was 40,000, divide it by 2, and we'll turn it into a loan and try to create how much money is. I know there's depreciated value, and I don't want to think like a bank. I want to think like a businessman, and because the bank's backwards as a business thinks. How much assets? Assets. There's. I got to go back my memory now. There's assets, tangible assets. I don't remember. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tangible assets you can't touch, and assets you cannot touch. I don't see the breakdown anywhere, because the trust fund is considered an asset. We can't touch that principal. You can touch the interest.
Are you talking about the 84,000 federal trust fund?
So,
Pardon me?
at some point, the Mohawk Council, the
He's
chair,
talking about the 1.6 million. The principal is locked down to 50 million.
the 1.6.
Are you talking about the money that's with the trust?
There's another worry I have about that that's going to come down. It's already going down with some of the native businesses on the Canadian side. And Ontario they're pushing after year. If you show a profit, or whatever you're doing, whatever it is, if you show a profit, they're coming after us as a profit, not a capital gains tax. I want to know what the council statement is on this.
So this presentation that we've done tonight is not the financial statements, not the audited financial statements. The audited financial statements do give the value of the assets that we have, talks about the revenue, talks about the expenses more in detail. This is a PowerPoint presentation on just the revenue.
There's no fix that. That's the word also.
So any monies that we have that maybe asset value is listed in the audited financial statements. With respect to the 1.6, all the money that's delivered by the Akwesasne Community Settlement Trust is administered by them, is held by them. It does not go through the Mohawk Council in the awarding process. So we essentially
the operational organizational structure.
We don't. It's not on our
There's
books.
such a thing as fixed assets, and that's where this would all fall under.
Yeah. So the fixed
You can't
asset
touch
dollar value would be in our
You can't
financial.
touch that dollar value.
The fixed asset dollar value would be in our financial statements. And this presentation is not about the financial statements, but we can get those
Somebody
numbers.
went through the audit, so that's where that come up.
Yeah. No, this isn't the audit presentation.
No.
This is just a budget presentation.
I just want to know what the projection is, but the question, am I wrong? I thought it was 3% on that payroll.
No. So back to your statement about your question about the lease payments. If somebody pays a $500 lease payment that the land belongs to a community owner, but it's administered through what assistance of us, they get the full $500.
I'm going to have to read that agreement there, so I wonder where that 3% comes from. They have to do with administration fees.
Yeah.
It may help you
They
with
probably
the
changed it
financial
over time, I would assume.
Yeah, maybe at one point when it first started, there maybe was a 3% fee, but there's not now.
I think it was the transfer fees that Indian Affairs was doing because they charged us 3% to handle our money.
Yeah.
I think that's what that's all. Okay.
All right, so thank you very much for this presentation. If you have other further questions, we can get those answers for you with respect to the financial statements. But this is the budget presentation, which is going forward. The financial statements is what has already happened, but we can arrange time to talk about that with our staff as well. Okay, thank you very much for that.
You can come and see us if you want to look at the 16, 17 statements. They are online. If you have questions, we will answer them.
It's been a long time since I covered this.
It's been a long time, so the door's
All
open.
right, so we're going to move along. We do have a presentation on the renewable energy strategy. We do have the director of Dana Denawago who is here. I will ask him to come forward. There is a PowerPoint presentation in your packages that looks like this. We'll go through this for you.
You can go right to the first slide. This is from the petition that was delivered to council in January 2016 by the island residents. And I highlighted two things. One is they asked council to acknowledge the increasingly high rate of electricity they're paying on the island. And two, provide the community residents of Cornwall Island with a strategic plan to address that issue. Our department, and working with our portfolio chiefs, decided to be proactive when we saw this. So the strategy that I'm going to share with you is what we're working on. At the same time this occurred, the next slide, climate change became a major issue, not only in Ontario, Quebec, in Canada, and around the world. And it's important for a couple of reasons. One is while the island is facing high electricity charges, the other two districts, Akwesasne and Ganadaga, don't have that problem. They pay amongst the lowest rates in North America. They have a reliability problem, and that's the frequent power outages that you go through. You know, so it's a different set of issues, but it's still related to energy. And climate change is only going to make it worse. That's the extreme storm events, high winds, lots of rain at once. Tornado warnings are becoming more frequent than we never used to have them. These are all signs of climate change, and we have to deal with the impacts. So that's a concern. The other side of it is the federal government, the provincial governments have committed funds to address climate change, and First Nations are eligible for it. So it's creating opportunities for funding that I'll be talking about. The next slide, the energy strategy itself, there's two parts to it. The first part is energy conservation. Reduce your energy usage. Find ways to save money and reduce the carbon footprint in response to climate change, because reducing greenhouse gas emissions is what triggers the funding coming to communities, if you can demonstrate that. So that becomes important. The second part is moving us as a community towards another energy source, and in particular renewable energy sources, whether it's solar, wind, geothermal, micro turbines in the river is a possibility, but these are all renewable energy sources. Water right now, hydro is a renewable energy source, but the problem is the price is so high in Ontario. The next slide, this is the first part of the strategy, is preparing us for renewable energy. So we've been developing the skills of staff in this area. The 2020 Catalyst is a national First Nation training program to increase our understanding of renewable energy technologies and preparing us to bring them here. We've had 3 staff take this training over the last 2 years. The second one, Trek Education. They specialize in educating youth on renewable energy technologies. And they worked at Walpole Island. We've brought them here. They're going to start doing education awareness in our school systems and preparing our youth to become the workforce of the future on renewable energy technologies. The third one here is right now at Yohahio, we're operating a 2-year energy system engineering technician diploma program. And we're training community members how to become technicians related to renewable energy technology. You know, so we're building the workforce through this. The next slide. This is our energy conservation focus and what we hope to do. We're calling it a Resilient Homes Project. We want to do energy audits and retrofits of 1,000 homes in the community. We have closer to 1,600 homes, but we figure not everybody's going to want to participate. So we're targeting 1,000 homes. The retrofits would include attic and basement insulation, new windows and doors, draft proofing, Energy Star appliances, putting in air exchange systems or replacing them in the homes if they have them already. In doing this project, it would raise living standards, it would reduce energy consumption, lower energy costs, and reduce the carbon footprint, which would get the funding here. The next slide is, the first part is what we would be doing with the homes. The second part is what we would be doing with the MCA facilities. There's 54 facilities. We're partnering with a company called Ecosystem. They would do a very similar process. We would go in, we would study the buildings, and based on that, we would do retrofits. We would replace all of the lighting here with LED lighting. If you haven't been to the arena, go there. We've done that already there. All of the lighting at the arena has been replaced with LED lighting, both inside and outside the building. And it makes a difference. That's probably one of the single biggest things you can do as a homeowner is buy LED light bulbs. They're a little bit expensive, but they last a long time. And you will see your energy bills drop quickly if you replaced all your light bulbs with LED bulbs in your home. For the MCA buildings, 54 facilities, we're estimating it would cost $2.4 million to do this project. The annual energy savings would be around $237,000, almost $250,000 in energy savings. From doing that, the proposal would involve training and awareness of staff. We don't just want to bring a company in here, do the work and leave. We want them come here, train our staff, and let us do it, and let us gain the knowledge so we can manage it going forward. In the end, it will conserve energy and it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The next slide, we're trying to diversify. And in this case, we're proposing to make an energy investment. We're pursuing a 10% equity investment in a 100 megawatt wind farm that's about 30 miles from here. And the 10% participation level as an equity investment will trigger in Ontario what's called an Aboriginal price adder. And what this means is that Ontario promoted private companies partnering with First Nations. And to get them to participate, they said to a company, if you're going to do a wind project or a solar project, and you get an Aboriginal partner, a First Nation, we'll pay you more for the energy that's produced from that project. And there's different percentage levels. For the one we're looking at, it's called a large renewable procurement, and it's a 100 megawatt wind farm, 33 turbines that will be constructed. The investment would be on the equity side. A 10% investment is $5 million. And what we have to do is figure out what's the return on that investment going to be so that we can decide whether or not to make the investment. The company has requested that before they share the financial projections with us, that council sign a non-disclosure agreement that protects the information they share because it is proprietary. I've presented it to council. They have not signed it yet. They wanted me to present it here tonight so that you're aware that we're going in this direction. In addition to the participation level, the 10% participation level, we've been talking with the company. It's EDP Renewables Canada is the name of the company. And if you've ever drove to Plattsburgh, you see all those windmills. They belong to this company, the American side of the company. they've got a small wind farm in Winchester, and this project, it's called Nation Rise Wind Farm that they're proposing. They've been approved, and it will build 33 wind turbines. We're talking to them about jobs. We had Mohawks working on the Chateauguay windmills. They're interested in having Mohawks work on this project. We've already had 2 community members work on the archaeological studies. So they're very interested in that being part of the partnership. The next slide. This is longer term, and we're proposing to create a community electric cooperative. We've had a feasibility study done. There's been 11 studies over since 1993. We had one that updated them. It is feasible and would benefit the community, but both the American and Canadian side have to participate in order to get the number of homes to make it work. It would generate over 20 years, 23 million in revenue, plus service the debt. The first year reduction in people's electric bills would be 22%. It would be less in the 2 Quebec districts because you're paying rates that are so low already, but you would still see we estimate 10% saving. It would be, the 22 would be on the island. It would be higher on the American side because it's American money, but there would be savings throughout the community. Our objective is to create 4 microgrids in setting this up, and each district would become its own microgrid. What that means is that in Sny, here in the village, if you have a power outage and you're on the grid, the microgrid would allow you to stay with electricity on. So you wouldn't have that reliability problem anymore. You would tie it into wind or solar, and the challenge becomes battery storage, because renewable energies are, they call it intermittent power. They only work when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. So it's those down times when it's not occurring that you have to have the battery storage so you can use that energy to keep the power flowing in the community. To do the project, we would purchase all of the assets in the community from National Grid on the American side, from Hydro-Quebec, and from Cornwall Electric. It would be an investment of about $25 million to make those purchases. But it would give us control of the distribution of electricity. Then council would have to negotiate, probably with Hydro-Quebec, to get an allotment that covers the entire community. And that would give us the lowest rates in North America. The next slide. This is longer term. We're working on building a renewable energy technology park, and we would propose that it would house geothermal, wind, solar, and hydro companies in the park, and would be manufacturing of renewable energy technology equipment. Attached to it would be a First Nation Center of Excellence on renewable energy technologies. And that the goal in going in this direction is job creation and developing expertise in deploying the technology. It's not a new idea. We've spoken a little bit with the Citizen Potawatomi of Oklahoma. They've already done this. They've built the Iron Horse Technology Park, and basically they built the park and then attracted foreign companies to come and locate in the park. Israeli companies for geothermal, Japanese companies for wind, Chinese companies for solar panels. And they do the final assembly, they set it up as a foreign trade zone, and no taxes on products until they leave and go into the US market. We would propose to try to do something similar in Canada and create the jobs that the community wants, and we think it's a good fit. I think this is the last slide, or the second to last slide. Doing all this costs money. To do the resilient homes, to do the 1,000 homes, the audits and the retrofits, $40 million. $40 million. What's that? That's, yeah. Yeah, so the MCA facilities retrofit is $2.4 million. The Mohawk Electric Cooperative, $25 million. The wind farm investment, $5 million. The energy system engineering technician training program, $250,000 for lab equipment. We need that right now. And if we want to start looking at creating our own alternative energy, the cost of a 3 megawatt turbine is $4.5 to $5 million. So I wanted to put this slide in to show you that this is going to be expensive. It's going to take a huge investment. But I didn't put a slide here when I talked about the climate change. There's money that's available. Grand Chief and I met with Green on Board Ontario, and Ontario has set aside up to $3.2 billion for First Nations, and we're trying to tap into that. We've submitted a $12 million proposal to the Green on Board. So we're in active discussions. We're talking about the first year of the home project, 250 homes, and then do that for 4 years to get the 1,000 homes. We talked about the $2.4 million for the MCA facilities. We know that Quebec would fund $600,000 of that, so that reduces that price down. So we're exploring that. The Mohawk Electric Cooperative is going to require more planning, but we believe it's a doable project. We submitted a letter of intent to Environment Canada's Low Carbon Economy Challenge. And if they like your proposal, they'll invite you to, if they like your letter, they will invite you to submit a full proposal. And they are prepared to award a minimum of $1 million, a maximum of $50 million per project. We've applied for the full $40 million. So we're waiting to hear back on later this summer on our application. We've met with the Green on Board. We're trying to bring them here. We think that part of the $12 million will get funded by them. We just don't know how much of it. But with the climate change response, with the discussion on carbon tax in Ontario, in Quebec, at the federal level, that's where the money's coming from. Canada has projected $81 billion over 10 years. Ontario did the first year, I think they created $2 billion in funding. So there is funding that's going to be available. There's programs being created all the time. It's positioning ourselves to take advantage of the opportunity. And that's what the strategy is trying to do. The last slide, this is the natural gas project that's proposed for the island. And it's an $8 million project. Enbridge is proposing it. They received a $3.4 million grant from Ontario. They're going to put up the rest of it. As an energy conservation project, it will cut greenhouse gas emissions for island residents by 50% if you're using a fuel oil furnace and you switch to natural gas. So we know there's going to be savings there. It will reduce energy consumption because it's a more efficient furnace. It's smaller, uses less energy. So that's why it's part of our strategy. And the last statement is that we know that the project is subject to community consultation, and the island residents, ultimately, you have to decide if you want the project to go forward. So that's the strategy. Questions?
Natural gas is not a renewable resource.
Right. That's why it's not part of the renewable energy side of the strategy. It's part of the energy conservation side.
$80 million that we're going to have to fund eventually. Wouldn't it be cheaper just to invest into universities so we can fund our own experiment instead of somebody else doing it for us?
What do you mean?
Well, you're mentioning basically to do the experiments you have to do the university. You get a university here, then we can get our own money to do what you're proposing for somebody else to do on our behalf.
That's not what I was saying.
Well, I'm seeing it that way because that's a lot of money.
Yes.
That's a lot of money, $80
Yes.
million. That's nothing to do with the 1 point and all these other little. It's a lot of money. The biggest, I can see the biggest obstacle right now with that proposal is the buyout. Because I'm reading through the language, correct me if I'm wrong, your proposal to buy into the Winchester Windmill project that's proposed?
Yes.
Because if it was here on the island, we already did research here from the old council. And Ontario will buy the buyback, Quebec will not. So that tells me that this buyout has to happen. That's $40 million before any of this can get started.
Yeah. With the
I heard a sum of $1.5 million given by an incentive from Ontario. I didn't hear anything from Quebec. Still, $38 million, $38.5 million you got to come up with.
Yep.
There's another alternative that's already started in the community. They're just looking for, that's why I brought the university in. And these people are sort of mad. They're mad at MCA, they're mad at the United States, they're mad at Canada. But they said that they will come and help us. But they propose to do a joint project with the Seaway right now. And hopefully we'll start seeing things at the end of the year, at the end of the Arena Road. Because it's still somehow, I didn't catch it without the land that was given back to me. Is that where the Arena Road is, that's still Seaway land, whereas everything else is already signed back.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
Have you ever looked into, I worked on 3 different big projects. They're called cogenerating stations. Now, the cogen is a lot easier than windmill solar panels. We have a natural gas line that crosses Cornwall Island. It's a 12-inch, 600-pound high-pressure line. That's the one that they want to tie in for our gas. The gas is plentiful there. And as far as all you're taking is the water from the river, you're putting it through a boiler with the natural gas, heat up the boiler, produce steam to turn the turbine. I mean, it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot easier. And if you're so concerned about the price of Cornwall Island, a cogen would be good there. It costs hardly nothing compared to what you're talking about.
Yes.
And another thing is Hydro One, you bought into that, right?
The Hydro One shares?
Yeah.
Yep, council did.
Yeah, you bought into that share. So what do you get from that? Like, what do you get from Hydro One buying into that?
We will get, after we service the debt for about 12 years, we'll receive a steady stream of revenue, a return on the investment.
And what percent?
Oh yeah, after how many years?
About 12.
12 years.
Yeah. And that's because we borrowed money to buy the shares.
45 million?
Pardon?
It's 45 million, right?
Oh no, it's the shares is 2.5% of the entire company, but it's all 133 communities in Ontario bought into it. It's upwards. It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, what was your share that we had to?
2.5 divided by 133 communities is our share. The actual value, I don't have it on hand, what our shares would be worth.
Yeah.
But it's projected that anywhere from 10 to 12 years, we'll start receiving a revenue. Because we borrowed the money, we have to pay the money back with the dividend returns.
Now that you mentioned that, maybe that's something that we can look into with Enbridge. You know, if the power's so high on the island, we can work something out with Enbridge instead of that. How many more years do we have in that $100,000 agreement, that $100,000, $500 agreement we have to cross on the island? You know, maybe there's some supplement we can work out with Enbridge to pay the difference to lower our cost of electric or something.
Yeah, it's good. Doing a cogeneration plant on the island is going to be a tough sell, I can tell you that right now. It was proposed a number of years ago, and it was rejected. So, I mean, I'm just sharing with you that, you know, that's just not viewed in a very positive light by many residents in the community. That's
Wonder why.
because of Reynolds, Alcoa, Domtar, and Cornwall. They see it as a pollution source.
It's not. It's not. It's just raw water. You're heating the boiler and sending it back to the river. It's clean.
So it's burning the natural gas that would be the issue. I'm just letting you know that it's not. It would be a hard sell in this community.
Any other questions on this presentation here? Yes?
Talk
Sorry.
about Enbridge.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys put a letter in Indian Times and you supported North Dakota, right? Tribal Council said they did the same thing. They supported the struggle in North Dakota. Then we come home and you guys are dealing with the same company that was in North Dakota. You want to put another gas line on Cornwall Island. Why? There's people in British Columbia fighting it. There's people in Leech Lake that want men to go up there. And here, I come home and you guys are dealing with Enbridge, the same company that had the worst oil spill that we know of. And you guys are dealing with it. Well, why? I want to know why.
Well, we're not.
In 1980, there was a proposal made with Barnhart, right? They're going to give us $32 million a year, and that's still up there. So from $32 million till now is a lot of money. We don't have to deal with Enbridge. They have an oil spill reputation, real bad, you know, and here you guys are dealing with it. So before push comes to shove, because we know there's people there that are totally against it, you know, we need to sit down and, you know, really try to understand what's going on here. Because you don't want to look bad across country. You're here, you're supporting the same company that sends dogs and tear gases our people, everything. And here you guys are supporting them. That makes us look bad. Where do we stand? Right? Where do we stand? Are you guys going to support them? Have you already taken money from them?
I already took the money and ran. Okay, so would you like me to respond now? So the Enbridge Gas came forward to us in the springtime and said there's an opportunity to apply for grant funding to be able to expand natural gas onto Cornwall Island. And council said at that time we would be prepared to support an application, but we won't give the consent to build a gas pipeline onto Cornwall Island until the community agrees with it. Now, why we did that is because one, Cornwall Island pays one of the highest electricity rates in all of our community. We continuously hear on Cornwall Island that people are struggling with the cost of electricity. So and Jim had part of his presentation talked about responding to a petition that was submitted about 2 years ago to council. So what we have done is we have said that we will now begin the process of chatting with the community to see if they're prepared to, have natural gas on Cornwall Island. There's nothing saying that we have to take it. But it's in the process now of starting those conversations with the community to learn about what natural gas is, what the benefits are, what the downfalls are, and at the end of the day, if Enbridge as a company, as a corporate company, is the company that we want to go into sort of an arrangement with. Nothing has been finalized. In fact, over the next several months, there will be those conversations happening with the community members to learn more about it and to determine whether they want it. At the end of the day also is that if the pipeline is going to go down Cornwall Island, people need to hook up to it because they're not going to put a gas pipeline to service nobody. So that's where we're at. We totally get that, you know, Enbridge may, or many oil companies may have bad corporate reputations. This is a natural gas pipeline, it's not oil, so if it breaks, it's not gonna spew oil out.
Yeah,
In
what
fact,
if you have a spill or anything?
yeah,
You
no,
bring that up?
absolutely. Well, there's not a spill. What
Because
happens,
Enbridge has a bad,
what happens with
reputation.
natural gas is it goes up. In fact, people believe that it goes down. Propane goes down. Propane is heavy, it goes to the ground. Natural gas goes up, so it's less likely to have an ignition. But the safety factor is something we've heard already from people. How are we going to keep our people safe from, a fire or whatever it may be? So very preliminary right now. This will not go through without the community's consent, because even if we were to put it in, nobody connects to it, the company's not going to put it in, right? So it's, it has to be a bill that people will use it and be comfortable using it. At the end of the day, they'll have to connect and pay for the gas. That's really in a nutshell where we're at. We have not consented in any way.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know that natural gas is a fossil fuel. You know that. It's 90% methane. It comes from the ground. It leaks out of the ground. Up north, they used to light it. It comes out of the faucet at night because it's so plentiful with natural gas. It's clean. It's cleaner than propane. It's a clean gas. This is not oil that's coming in. There's a 12-inch line underneath by the bridge, and it comes across the Cornwall Island. It's been there since the 50s. It's a 12-inch high-pressure line, about 600 pounds. Enbridge wants to tap in there because they're feeding Messina. They're feeding all St. Lawrence County. Now they want to go to Franklin County and feed the casino, all the gas to them. When we're sitting on the island, we have an opportunity now to tap into that gas line, lower our costs, and just distribution lines of gas that's going to go to the house. It's not a whole new line. We're just tapping into the line that's existing. It's been there for a while.
Well, like what happened to the first one that was put in, it was pulled after the fact. You know what I mean? We heard that was already.
If it should have been protested, it should have been protested in the 50s before that 12-inch high-pressure line. Now, the agreement was made that $100,500 a year for 20 years was agreed upon when Tim Thompson was Grand Chief. I believe Tim was in office at the time. So they've already been collecting for that gas line. Enbridge keeps control of that line. They're responsible for everything to do that line. And all I can say is, as a community member, that we need to wait and hear Enbridge. Let them come do a presentation so we can ask them questions. Because I live on the island, Ian, and I'll tell you, I'm buying propane right now from P38. Used to buy birds one place. I have 5 furnaces I take care of. And one is number 9, I got number 2 fuel oil. And if we can get natural gas, I'll tell you, I'd
Well, that's the us to digest that, like going into North Dakota to pouring them and
That's oil.
to 30, 40
That's
below
oil.
and they're sending dog and tear gas, everything. These are the same people that.
That's the oil, big oil line going under the Missouri River.
Are they fracking for the natural gas?
Huh?
Are they fracking it? Or are they extracting it?
Yeah, the fracking, that's the only
Fracking it?
natural gas.
Yeah, I mean, we can
So we will, over the next several months,
We can ask.
we will continue to have these conversations.
So you have Enbridge show up, call a meeting and.
Well, there's actually going to be, the strategy is to have a couple just community meetings with ourselves to talk about this stuff, because we've already heard from community members that we don't want Enbridge in the room, because, at the end of the day, they have a benefit to gain. So we're going to bring in experts in gas that know the industry, that don't work for Enbridge, to talk about this stuff with us, to help educate us on this, and to answer the questions about fracking and things like that, right? So this is going to be, this will be a very extensive consultation with the community, and the community will decide, right? At the end of the day, it has to be built, people have to hook up, and people have to pay for it, buy the gas, right? So it's not going to happen if people don't want it, right? So that's where we're at. I mean, that's kind of the update in a nutshell of where the natural gas expansion. Yes.
The community needs to be more informed because.
Well, yeah,
Because of what Enbridge does.
it's very preliminary right now. Over the next several months, these conversations will be happening.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Jim, just one thing. You mentioned carbon tax.
Yes.
You mentioned Maine.
Yes.
I know a little bit about this. Some of our brothers in South America are trying to access the same fund you're talking about.
You know, I'm not even gonna look how Alberta is and how we are, different. There is one big difference. Every single plastic bottle that we buy in this part of the country, we have 5 cents carbon tax on it. How do you refund that 5 cents back? Even those little energy drink bottles are 5 cents a bottle. But that's besides the point. Who is this person? You said funding is going to be made available through the carbon tax.
Yes.
What is this department of water people? That's some concepts that go along with renewable resources. Concepts that I want to try to develop myself.
Yep. The Green On Board is the Green Ontario Fund, and it's a fund that's been set up to fund energy projects that are renewable. The legislation that brought the carbon tax in Ontario requires that it be put back into renewable energy projects. So projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions in particular.
Okay, so this thing in back of my mind, I can eventually forward my proposal to Green On Board, see how you get money for it then?
Yes.
Yes.
Or is it just, oh, I don't know.
There's a lot of information online about the projects and the guidelines that they'll fund.
Yeah. Yeah. I was asked just to repeat that the investment opportunity in the wind farm. My department wants to evaluate whether it's a good investment. There's 16 of these projects across Ontario that were approved. 13 of them have Aboriginal partners, First Nation partners. 3 of them don't. Nation Rise is one of those 3. It's also the largest project of the 16. 6 Nations is involved in one project. Tyendinaga is involved in another. Curve Lake, Algonquins. The opportunity to invest is there for council. But as I said, the company has said we're willing to share with you the financial projections so that you can determine what your return on investment will be. But we want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. So that's why I presented it to council. They didn't want to sign it unless I brought it here first and made sure people were aware of it before we did that.
You're talking about the big solar farms that...
It's a wind farm.
There's solar farms out in Long Sault in that area?
Yes, yeah.
That's what you're looking at?
No, this one we're looking at specifically, it would be a wind farm project in North Stormont, 33 wind turbines, like what they've done in Chattagay.
Yeah.
Same type of project.
I have a suggestion on that.
Yes.
Maybe it would be easier, because $80,000 is a lot of money for the overall project. The base is 40, then you're talking to, I don't know it exactly, but it's a lot less than 40 than what I got written down here. Just look at a scenario, if we buy in, because automatically, once they're up, we're actually going to get money. We don't have to wait 10 years, we don't have to wait 20 years. And that money be funded to this project done in the bridge in the area. The council already did research on this in the past. And what happened then, because it was, solar farm was proposed to go on the island by a private citizen, and they found out that our power comes from Quebec, and Quebec don't do the buyback, the overrun buyback, only OLG, and so the project was squashed.
Yeah.
You know, I see a possible alternative, invest, but use that fund slowly to do the buyback or buyback rate. I know it's a nightmare.
Yeah, we are trying to create own source revenue through it, so.
The other thing I would have proposed was for the island only, because there is a line that goes to Messina Point. If we tap into that, then we can sell our electricity to Messina, because New York State does the buyback. You know what I'm saying? It is possible.
All right, there's a question right here.
Have you thought of looking at getting a direct line from Quebec Hydro line that goes to Messina to Aquano Island, eliminating electric, Aquano Electric?
Our strategy is to buy the assets from Cornwall Electric on the island, and then reach a transmission agreement for getting the power from Hydro-Quebec using the Fortis lines.
I'm not sure if we did that study, but that was one of the recommendations was to possibly buy, have a direct line from Quebec Hydro to Cornwall Island. But you will have to buy the infrastructure from Cornwall Electric. That would be your own.
Yes, yeah.
That would make us or have a marine line from St. Regis to Cornwall Island.
Yes, and
How much, I forget how much that would cost. That was one of the recommendations at the time.
yeah, Cornwall Island is actually Hydro-Quebec powered,
Yeah, it's power,
but they mark it up because it goes through Cornwall Electric.
Man, that would be all right.
Yeah, that's the strategy.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Jim, for that
Okay.
presentation. Thank you for your questions on that. So we'll move along on the agenda. There was an update scheduled from the Akwesasne Police Commission. Unfortunately, the chair commission was not able to join us this evening, so we're going to defer that. The corridor project update, there is a handout within your packages that just outlines the next steps with respect to the improvements happening on Gawanoge within the bridge corridor. There was some construction that will be beginning, or has begun already, and will continue over the next several months, and that is the construction of side roads within the corridor. So there is an update in your packages for you as well. The land claims update, so the $239 million offer from Canada with respect to the the Dundee-Gillespie land claim. Over the month of May, we'll be having a number of information sessions with the community to discuss, to learn more about the land claim itself, as well as have those conversations about the proceeds. So there will be a framework that will be developed with respect to the framework, with respect to the proceeds and how that will be invested, and that will be done in consultation with the community over the next several months. Also, the investment vehicle will be something that is discussed because we do have an existing community settlement trust that we may want to learn from our experience with respect to that, and may look to develop a trust that may work a bit differently, or some other investment vehicle. So the Seaway claim, as has been announced in January, that we received an offer from Canada to settle the claim. That will be going to referendum later in the fall. Over the next several months of the summer into the fall, there will be information sessions held with respect as well to the Seaway claim. Those are the updates that we have with respect to the claims this evening. We have covered the natural gas expansion on Gawanoge earlier in the presentation which the director provided to us. So we did give a brief synopsis of what the next steps are with respect to the expansion of natural gas onto Gawanoge. Again, there will be extensive community consultation that will occur over the next several months, information meetings over the next several months about natural gas, what the benefits are, what the risks are, conversations about the company itself that we may be willing to partner with, and then more technical questions about the safety aspects as well as what it's going to take to actually convert and connect to natural gas if the community is prepared to do that. Okay, so at this time, I will ask for business from the floor, from any community members that are here this evening that may want to address council or have questions of council. We will take those now. Okay.
We have a trust fund. I don't agree with some of the things behind the trust fund because of the history of this. Before the trust fund, there was 18 industrial farms that we lost because the land got flooded. How many in this room knows these stories? These are our own history here again. But again, though, I want to point at the farms that we lost. We're in an age where there's so much opportunity right now. I did a dummy proposal with the government, and I went as a greenhouse vegetable. I want to expand it to canning, and I want to expand it to export. The Canadian government, they first got, when the Liberals first got it, they were willing to give me $126 million. This was just for a dummy corporation. You have this license, you have this trust fund. Maybe it's about time you start looking at food. All these meetings I've been going to, all the young kids, they want work here. We have so much opportunity right now. We have so much support overseas. There's a lot of things that we haven't looked at. Maybe it's time to look at this stuff. Greenhouse, I don't fully agree with the science behind the LEDs because they're built on a blue beam spectrum of the sun. That blue beam spectrum, I think we need to step back a little bit more about this. Sure, it raises everything cheaper. There's a lot of old technology that we have overlooked. Again, there's a big movement. I'm going to use New Zealand for this one statement. New Zealand makes $120 billion a year on organic industry alone. What does that mean to us here? What is the possibilities that we can do? We have $26 million in this one trust fund where you use the interest. We have to use this interest or the government's going to throw this big, not property gains tax, but there's another tax they're going to be throwing at us in the future. It's already part of Indian affairs. We even had the stuff I read, there's about 5 community members in the last 200 years that has actually worked for Indian Affairs that wasn't directed on Indian Affairs. Indian Affairs was started on behalf of leased land. This brings me back to this agreement that he talked about, the buy-in to, I'm scared of the wording, because it's worded in there, because we have no natural resources. Billy knows about all the people before him. Most of the major fight with council was our leased land. How many papers? Deeds from non-native people living on the Nutfield tract land that was brought to council that says Indian land. This brings back the story to the 199-year lease land, which our ancestors leased out on our behalf. Now we got to fight for our houses. Now we got to fight. This was all supposed to be there to protect us from what we got to go through now. It seems like we getting off track. Politicians like this get off track. You don't have to fund that. You don't have to do none of this. You can save their money, but it is our money. That's the point. And they said it. It's our money. But the biggest thing though is maybe it's about time we get back to our own roots. Our own roots is agriculture. We weren't hunters. We weren't gatherers. We were farmers. That's what brought us to this point we are today. So maybe it's, maybe it's a lesson or nothing, whatever. Think outside the box of modern technology. I got a dream where, with this concept I got, that's why I asked for a green code. Anyways, there's a concept I'm working on, and the dream is to have everybody's porch be able to have something that's going to mature every month of the year. And it's all possible. And right now, the thing that was missed overlooked, there is other private business, private community members. They're already looking to this new natural resources. I mentioned a little bit about the Seaway land by the arena. 2 universities are going to come here and spend money on us. But what they're looking for is somebody besides the government to put an investment in. They don't want to go to the government because of what happened with the fires on the island. Everybody start blaming each other. They don't want that to happen anymore. It's a private entity that's doing this, referring to universities. What can we do with $80 million? Wouldn't it be better to invest it into university? Then we can start taking the reins of the self-government and doing everything for ourselves. There's all kinds of possibilities, but I still believe we got to strive to get a university or at least a college here. And not possess a full-blown college. Where does Cortland get their money? Cortland gets their money from CIA. Cortland has all the patents on industrial hemp, the plastic. They have the industrial hemp wood product, the fireproof. CIA has the patents on that because they're funding Cortland. How do you develop this stuff? You got to fund a university.
No, absolutely. I think it was
I'm trying to make it short. A lot of things are already mentioned.
Thank you.
A lot of people are leaving.
Thank you for your comments. We have been talking about farming. We have been in the last few months talking about what it should look like for us based on the potential of the Dundee claim. We talked about the area out there. We've had a lot of community meetings where the community members themselves are talking about maybe we should farm. We have been talking about looking at Agriculture Canada for funding. We know that in order for us to be a self-governing community, we should be a sustainable community as well. And if we can start to grow our own food, we have a lot of farmers, we have a lot of people that do their own private thing. But if we can assist in providing a market for them to sell that as well, if we could look at making it bigger with cattle and eggs and chicken and everything, more than just growing vegetables and stuff, we could start sharing and sell our transporting to other First Nations who are paying $20 for a gallon of milk. You know, we can do that if we sit down and really look at what we want to spend the next land claim on. We've been having the community meetings, people have been coming out with their ideas. We know that we're not going to spend $200 million in 1 week. We have to be able to look at that money to sustain us as well. If we invest it well, if we use it well, we can live off the interest of most of it, but we still will have to purchase land. And my thought is that when I was thinking about this myself was that people like to work. People may not necessarily want to go back and get the higher education, but they like to work. And if we can get them to be working in the agricultural field, we could be successful in it. So we have been talking about it. We have ran it across our table a couple of times. We've talked to community members about it because it was their idea too. So we've been having good discussions in the Jigalaji's information sessions, and they've been ongoing for months. So when we talked earlier about what the finances would look from that, that's where community is starting to put their input in. That's where their ideas are coming forward. That's where they're saying, how do we do an educational component that's local that we're spending here? You know, just because that money is coming in, we don't necessarily have to spend it. We could still reach out to Agriculture Canada, to universities, anywhere we can find funding that money stays and starts to sustain us. Because if we want to be self-governing, we still have to be able to sustain ourselves with what we'll get for that self-governing. So we have an opportunity here to thrive if we do it well. So we've been talking about farming, we've been talking about agriculture, and we've been talking about eventually transporting to other First Nations. You create your own trucking company. You take stuff up, you bring stuff back. You can get fish and you can get moose and you can get other things that we don't have here.
There is some old technology still on those islands. You start the DAS technology, you have the old cotton technology that's growing here and there on Sugarbush Island, because that was once a cotton plantation. You know, there's things that are still available to us.
There is, but you also want to look at what you're talking about university and colleges and so. So there's new technology that will see us make it bigger. And that'll require us to you know, maybe we turn around and we use Joha Hill and we put an agricultural program in there to start this. You know, but the community has to tell us that's what they want. But we've been having discussions on it.
The underlying mission, I hate for the bulls right now, but the other underlying thought back in my head was industrial hemp. Because there are all this facts and stuff that comes from.
That was brought to the table too. Yep. So people are putting their suggestions forward. We're hearing it. And to me, that was an excellent idea because over the last few years, you've seen a lot of people go back to growing their own garden and then some. You see farms with beef cattle and chicken and eggs and everything. You know, we had a whole program that went back to cooking and using the food that they were growing. So it was, it's there. People are looking for it.
All right, thank you.
It is indeed a good idea. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Was there anything else that we wanted to be brought to council's attention this evening?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have one. I went down to the council. I met your executive director, Jordan. I was talking to him about. I called Errol, left messages with Cactus Sunday. I didn't get a message back, but I talked to Jordan. is it possible for an individual to get an outline of a specific claim? Because there was a claim made for the Nutfield track, which now they combined it like we talked about before with the North Shore land claim. But their first argument they had with the Nutfield track, is it possible for someone, if I put a request in, and they're going to look into it, but I don't know, am I allowed to have that claim so I can?
Yeah, I think that as long as there's no privileged information in there that's state secret, then yeah, it should be available. We'll double check on that.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we'll follow up. Okay.
I have one
Anything
more
else?
thing I forgot about.
Okay.
And it's in 1986, we took over our social assistance program here in Akwesasne. Now I have to ask you all one question. Who really knows about Trudeau's white paper in this room? Who can actually tell me about Trudeau's white paper?
69.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be on welfare, but I am on welfare. I'm on medical, and it's only $328 a month. Can you live off of that? I asked why. To me, it looks like we're enforcing Trudeau's white paper with our social system. Oh, you're just going to drink your money up. Who the fuck says I'm alcoholic? Excuse my language. That's what I felt inside. And the look I see in people's eyes, oh man, I'm tired of our people getting belittled that go there. We actually belittled with our foreign policy, and these are our policies. So I inquired a step further. I went to some politicians I know, and they told me, I asked one question. As a community member in your district, how can I change this? I'm not saying I was a reserve member, I'm not saying it was Akwesasne. How can I change this situation? Right away, he knew what I was talking about. He said, well, that's where I got the 1986 number from. The only way this can be changed is you and council take a look at this. Because the government, the Quebec, federal government, the Quebec government gave you autonomy over this. Another question I have that goes in line with this is, we already lost monies in some of the budgets because our supervisors didn't put in their budgets for this. When I worked for the arena, we had a vote, and the workers voted not to go from, because we were going from night shift straight to day shift, according to the act that we're, the labor code, the federal labor code, that we're supposed to be governing ourselves under here in Akwesasne, because we're a federal recognized reserve, states that the employee on federal lands has to give us a suit. Because the supervisor didn't put in for our work boots, we had to buy it on the assumption that we're going to get reimbursed. But when we put our receipts in to get reimbursed, we did not get reimbursed. So the only thing is, I'm asking, why do they try to save this money? I know about politics and budgets. If you don't spend your budget, the Canadian government's going to cut it off next year. I don't understand why they're trying to save money. This fuel, everybody on welfare should be getting this fuel. Everybody on welfare should get the green bag. Don't you think? You can slide a little bit of trust money towards that and tell our supervisor, quit trying to save money, it's not yours. Hey, Steve, every time we work out reserve, don't we pay taxes? Where's this money coming from? Most of it's coming from taxes. Well, I pay taxes, sir. There's another petition I'm getting going with the Canadian government that says a citizen.
All right. Well, I appreciate you bringing that forward. I will ask on the portfolio to follow up with you after because it is a policy issue with respect to the service that you've been receiving as well, kind of the thought that it's our money type thing. We'll have the portfolio follow up with you on that. Just on the fuel aspect, I do believe that it actually is budgeted this year going forward for the recipients to receive fuel.
I don't want to be on welfare.
To receive fuel the same as other community members do. I'll ask the portfolio follow up.
And green food bag has been extended to everybody on their personal system.
As well. So that one's just recent as well. Yes?
This was brought up a few meetings ago in Sinai, that the welfare was getting 20% and 30% less than anybody else. They have to go anywhere, they have to hire a taxi. There's a lot of services that they have to pay for, and with less money than outside. I've asked the council to look into that, so maybe you should be giving them an update on what you come up with.
Yeah, no, we can make sure that we get an analysis of the rates and make sure that if we're receiving less here, we'll report that back. Okay.
Is there any more meetings this year?
No, there will not be.
This is the last
This
one.
is it.
Brings up another point. I keep
Jim,
on
you're not
hearing.
on there? You're running?
All right. I have to read a resolution for the record here, so it's to accept and approve the general meeting minutes of April 26, 2018. If I could have a mover, please. Moved by Steve, second by Tim. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Question. Question's been called. Resolution. All in favor? Any against? None against. The resolution is carried. All right, so that brings us to the end of our meeting for this evening. I want to thank all of you for coming out to the general meeting of May 24th here at the Ganacho Recreation Center. As well, I do want to say that this is going to be our last general meeting of this council, so I want to thank all of you for the support over the last 3 years. Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn, Joe and Daryl. Thank you.